Hey guys, today I'll show you a supernatural horror TV series named Sleepy Hollow Season 2. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. Previously on Season 1, Crane, who fell during the Revolutionary War, was resurrected in Sleepy Hollow Town 250 years later by a spell cast by his wife Katrina, who is a white witch. He befriended a police officer, Abby. Crane and Abby are both the witnesses described in the Bible, determined to prevent the apocalypse. Later, Abby is trapped in Purgatory, Katrina is kidnapped by the Death Rider, namely the Headless Horseman, and Crane is buried alive in a tomb by Henry, who was actually his demonized son. Henry, in the end, became the War Rider after siding with demon Moloch, the leader of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. At this time, Crane is put into the dark, closed coffin by Henry, and he calls Abby for help. However, the scene suddenly changes to the time when Crane is staying in the cabin, as if this is a flashback. Across from him is Abby, holding a birthday cake. The atmosphere is warm and harmonious. A message comes from the police station and they leave in a hurry. It turns out that a professor from the Historical Society believes he's in danger and insists that Abby and Crane protect him. Upon reaching the door, the headless body on the ground indicates that the Death Rider is nearby. They return to the car, grab their gear, and prepare for battle. Their weapons are diverse and excellent. Once inside the house, the professor's head is missing. The materials on the table indicate that the deceased was recently studying Franklin, suggesting many aspects of history are worth discussing. Unexpectedly, the two had completely different views on this historical giant. Then, Crane noticed the roots of the bonsai tree wriggling, which was odd, yet he didn't mention it to his partner. Instead, he quietly retrieved a stack of hidden documents from a secret compartment in the drawer. Suddenly, the Death Rider appears to flex his headless head. Abby uses up her holy bullets in a round of shooting, and Crane's arrow doesn't seem to have the expected effect. The Death Rider throws a grenade, and after the explosion, he disappears. An enraged Crane decides to chase after him, vowing to kill his wife's murderer. Abby, who also lost her sister to the Death Rider, remains calm and convinces Crane to focus on the task at hand. Returning to the police station, they discover that the materials come from Franklin libraries across the country. One document suggests that Franklin found a carbon key in the documents at Harvard University. Crane recognizes the key. It's the same one that Franklin hung on the kite when collecting lightning. At that time, he had just returned from England and claimed to have joined a mysterious organization called the Hellfire Club, which was rumored to be dedicated to hindering America's development. The young Crane worked for Franklin and saw him preparing for an air bath, completely nude. After being struck by lightning for the first time, the key wasn't destroyed, which disappointed Franklin. He muttered about having to hide the key to keep it away from the claws of evil. Abby understands that this famous historical feat had nothing to do with electricity experiments. The real purpose was to destroy the key. The reason for this, according to the professor's notes, is that the key, known as the Gehenna key, can break the rules of Purgatory, where the only rule is that souls can never leave unless another soul replaces them. The key is a bug that can break this rule and release any soul from Purgatory at will. Abby sighs, wishing she had this device a year ago when she was being chased around by the Demon Lord every day. However, Moloch, as the guardian of Purgatory, is also bound by its rules. If Moloch gets the key, it could spell trouble. The two of them pored over the notes of the deceased professor and Officer Corbin, but found no clues about the storage location of the key. Crane proposed that they try their luck with Henry. Such an important artifact would surely be sought after by the 4 horsemen, assuming Henry would tell the truth. The two arrived at the dungeon where Henry was imprisoned. He seemed to be living a leisurely life, with his greatest pastime being tending to flowers and plants. Placing his hand on the notes, Henry claimed there were no clues, but his playful grin suggested otherwise. He jokingly asked Abby to lend him her hand. Maybe he could find some hints in her sins. Valuable information often hides in suppressed memories. His words served as a wake-up call for Abby. It turned out that her sister Jenny once asked her to retrieve a sketchbook that contained a drawing of the key. However, since Jenny had been taken, the exact location of the sketchbook remained unknown. The mention of death and graves made Crane uncomfortable. Their experiences and training over the past year always felt unreal, as if something very important had been forgotten. Now, neither of them could recall how they had captured Henry. Suddenly, Henry broke free of his chains and told them that Moloch brought Crane here to find out the whereabouts of the key, and Jenny was the clue. Hearing that, Abby realized they were not in the flashback, but still trapped in Purgatory ruled by Moloch. Crane tried to escape but was captured and returned to the dungeon. The coffin wrapped him up again, and the next second Crane woke up in the same coffin. It turns out all the experiences just now were dreamscapes created by Henry. It seemed that not much time had passed. Meanwhile, Jenny was enduring brutal torture at the hands of Henry. Although she resisted, Henry still managed to get the information he wanted through mind reading. He arranged for the Hessian mercenaries to watch over Jenny while he went to retrieve the key. During his attempt to escape from the grave, Crane discovered that the soil contained sulfur, which could be used to make explosives. In the old house in the dense forest, Katrina tried her best to escape, but the ever-vigilant Death Rider and the gap in their abilities made it almost impossible. At the same time, Abby in Purgatory encountered the demonized officer Andy. Although he claimed to provide sanctuary, Abby couldn't trust the man in front of her. Andy said he had a way to escape Purgatory, but they had to do as he said. Abby was interested in this proposal and decided to hear his plan. Seeing Moloch drop his blood on the ground, Andy said Moloch was creating an army of evil in order to pave the way for the 4 horsemen of Apocalypse before their arrival to the human world. Abby asked Andy to find a way to contact Crane. In the coffin, Crane was recording his last words, but the recording failed because the phone's storage was full. Determined to survive, he used the available tools to make a simple bomb and blasted open the grave. He hurried back to the town of Sleepy Hollow. At this point, Jenny used all of her chicken strength to kill a muscular Hessian mercenary guarding her and called Crane to inform him of her location. Guided by Andy through the wandering spirits, Abby arrived at Moloch's lair. Previously, Katrina would sneak in when Moloch was away. Inside was a mirror that reflected the path to the outside world. This was how Katrina communicated with the mortal realm and how Moloch targeted Abby and her sister. The activation method was to recite the spell on the base stone and then say the name of the person you were looking for. Abby's explanation was spot on, and Andy hurriedly said his goodbyes. Crane found the abandoned factory where Jenny was held captive, and they successfully escaped after a fierce fight. On the way, Crane explained what had happened, saying that they must find the key to rescue Abby from Purgatory. He asked Jenny if she knew the whereabouts of Franklin's sketchbook. It turned out that it was stored in the archives with Corbin's materials, but the content was encrypted. Fortunately, Crane, during his work for Franklin, had learned his unique alphabet. The text indicated that the key had always been kept by Franklin himself and left in Sleepy Hollow. Strangely, he was not buried there. Fortunately, Jenny knew the town like the back of her hand and knew where to look. On the other side, Abby quietly entered Moloch's lair, evading swarms of bats, and recited a spell in front of the magic mirror. Crane's soul was summoned to Purgatory. Both survivors were overjoyed. Crane told Abby that Jenny had been saved, while Abby told Crane that Moloch was amassing a large army of evil, and Purgatory's wandering spirits were about to sweep the human world. Upon hearing this news, Crane became alert. If the key to blocking the Purgatory army's path to Earth was Franklin's key, then the rescue operation could be a trap set by Moloch. If he took the opportunity to snatch it while everyone was rescuing Abby, the consequences would be unimaginable. Abby understood the greater good, deciding to let Crane go first and not worry about her. He just needed to figure out a way to protect the key. Back in the real world, Crane told Jenny that Abby had just contacted him through soul summoning, and the situation in Purgatory was critical. Later, they arrived at the town's only Franklin statue, but the Hessian mercenaries had already got there first. Crane thought of Franklin and the last part of his riddle. The secret to success is hidden in the ticking clock. They turned and saw the big clock on the church opposite the statue. They found a brick with Franklin's initials on the wall. They pried it open, and sure enough, the key was inside. In a small cabin in the woods, the Death Rider changed into his previous clothes, seemingly preparing for a meeting with Katrina. He put on a necklace, and in the illusion, the Death Rider's head grew back. Before his death, he was Katrina's fiancé, Brunt. Even though he knew his friend Crane had taken his place, he still hoped Katrina would change her mind. Crane, having retrieved the key, returned to Purgatory once again. At this point, Abby was anxiously searching for the protective necklace given by Katrina. Just as she was about to despair, she looked up and saw Crane in front of her. Overjoyed, she was about to drink from the wine he offered when another Crane suddenly appeared in the distance and shouted to stop her smelly mouth. It turned out that the Crane in front of her was Demon Lord Moloch in disguise. After falling, she looked up again and saw one Crane fighting the other. The victor, holding the key, quickly took her hand and left. After only a few steps, he urged Abby to recite the spell, addressing her as Darling. Abby, knowing that Crane never calls her that way, drew the sword from the ground and beheaded him. The real Crane arrived just as Moloch's real body was approaching in the distance. Countless spirits emerged from the ground. As they ran, they loudly recited the spell. A locked door appeared. Crane used the key to open the door, and they quickly left Purgatory. On the other side of the door, Moloch was approaching on the Ferrari horseback. Just as he was about to cross over, the tunnel disappeared, and the key in Crane's hand turned to dust. Inside the cabin afterwards, Crane was preoccupied with his wife and son. Although they had successfully thwarted Moloch's plan this time, he knew it was only a matter of time before the Demon Lord struck again. In the underground tunnel, Moloch assigned a new task to Henry. Melted into the steel walls, the armored knight was sent to the world of the living. He would sweep Sleepy Hollow under Henry's control. The Death Rider brought Katrina to a fire magic array. Henry cut both their palms, allowing their blood to mix. It was like a supernatural version of a marriage ceremony. The Death Rider then beheaded her. This nightmare caused Crane to wake up, deeply worried. According to the chapter left in the Bible, an apocalypse herald took a human bride through a ceremony. Based on the fastest speed at which the Death Rider could travel before dawn, Abby roughly identified the buildings he might have entered. They hoped Crane could use his understanding of the Death Rider's past life to pinpoint the specific location. With the former Inspector Irving suspected of the priest's murder, Officer Lena was appointed as the new inspector and assigned to handle the town's police affairs. Lena seemed tough. She had been in charge of drug cases before returning to her hometown to restore order and quell people's fears. Crane found Abby. He believed that his friend Brunt, the Death Rider, was originally not a sentimental person, and Katrina's father wanted to become rich through a marriage alliance. Their union seemed more like a transaction, but Brunt must have truly fallen for Katrina, so his mansion in the depths of the forest was likely the place of her confinement. Before sundown, they drove there and spotted the Death Rider's warhorse. It seemed they had found the right place, but the Death Rider was highly alert. They had to retreat and plan first. To successfully rescue Katrina, they would have to distract the Death Rider first. Jenny found records about human demon in ancient books. It was said to be a creature assembled from the limbs of fallen soldiers and had the power to contend with the Death Rider. Crane remembered that Franklin was very obsessed with death and had conducted the most extreme experiments. To fight against the Death Rider, Washington even obtained a spell to create a human demon from Sisterhood of the Radiant Heart. It was a body capable of trapping a death spirit. Franklin was in charge of the experiment. He collected the remnants of fallen soldiers and assembled the strongest parts together. But the creature wasn't awakened at the time because it lacked a crucial ingredient. It's a part of the Death Rider's tissue. Luckily, they now had the Death Rider's skull. Unlike Crane's optimism, Abby was worried that the awakened human demon could become a new threat. At the moment, Moloch recalled Henry to the lair and insisted he must complete his task successfully. Once achieved, the reconquest of the human world was imminent. On Crane's side, they discovered that the chapter also mentioned Franklin, who had preserved a fully assembled body. As night fell, the Death Rider again lavished attention on Katrina. Seeing her unmoved, he persuaded Katrina to give up on seeing Crane again, insisting that Crane was more interested in Abby. He claimed that only by following the Demon Lord could she find happiness. Abby went to the prison to visit Irving, wanting to know where the Death Rider's skull was kept. He said he had stored it in a bank, looking quite proud. Abby urged him to reveal the truth about the demon's murders, as visiting a patient is much more convenient than visiting a prison. Arriving at the bank, Crane was surprised to find that the financial system was harder to deal with than the regular army. Looking at the grim skull and recalling all the misfortunes that had occurred since the Death Rider appeared, Abby started to hesitate again. But Crane believed that the power of the skull could certainly be used for good. Jenny, who went to retrieve the weapons, ran into Lena in the archives. Lena knew all about Jenny's past wrongdoings, making the conversation quite awkward. Upon seeing the bag, which was filled with enough firearms to arm a small squad, Lena arrested Jenny without a word. She had long been suspicious of Crane and his group's actions. Jenny took all the blame for the crimes, but Lena turned her suspicion towards Crane. She couldn't understand why a historical consultant was needed for an investigation. Abby suggested they resolve the current trouble first and deal with Lena later. To be transferred to a mental hospital smoothly, Irving was undergoing a lie detector test. However, Lena saw through his intention in a glance. Even if he left the prison, his days wouldn't be easy. Crane and Abby arrived at the town with a network of underground tunnels. They believed that the human demon created by Franklin was hidden there. However, as they walked, both realized the map they held was unreliable. The person who drew it seemed to lack even basic sense of direction. An unexpected appearance of bats reminded Abby of the encounter in Moloch's lair. Staying alone in Purgatory was not fun. Crane was curious about what his partner had experienced during that time. Abby was emotional, saying that since then, everything seemed unreal. She wasn't sure if she was experiencing another illusion. Knowing that one shouldn't eat or drink in Purgatory, she still prepared to drink the wine offered by the fake Crane. She now realized that her biggest weakness was her absolute trust in Crane. Perhaps Katrina or Henry was Crane's weakness, and Moloch would cleverly use this to achieve his purpose. Abby accidentally noticed some metal on the wall and prepared to check it. But Crane was more alert and recognized the emblem on it as representing a well-known scientist family whose research in electricity almost rivaled Franklin's. Abby used a wooden pole and an entrenching tool to release the electricity. She then pressed the mark of the Freemasons. A large coffin slid out from the end of the tunnel. Inside was the well-preserved human demon. In the willow forest, Henry came to see Katrina. He denied his identity as a human and predicted that when Crane and his companions came to rescue, they would be caught in one swoop. Crane and Abby began trying to awaken the human demon, while the Death Rider was also preparing for the battle. Meanwhile, Henry was tidying up stationery. The specially treated pen should have other uses. The War Rider was ready, and as the sky gradually darkened, there seemed to be a problem with Crane's spell as the human demon remained unconscious. Katrina suddenly changed her attitude, confessing her true feelings to the Death Rider. She blamed the Death Rider for rushing things in the past, pushing her into Crane's arms. This time she would choose the Death Rider, only hoping he would give her more time. Whether the Death Rider believed her or not, he walked away without a word. As the sky completely darkened, the Death Rider patrolled around and discovered Crane and the others. Swinging his battle axe, he charged at them. At the last moment, Crane finally got the spell right. Several thin strips of flesh wrapped around the body of the human demon and the skull of the Death Rider, merging them into one. The human demon was revived that way. This fellow was indeed fierce, and he did not lose to the Death Rider in their battle. Crane took the opportunity to enter the cabin and rescue Katrina, but to his surprise, Katrina refused to leave. She decided to stay by the Death Rider's side, both to dissolve his hatred for Crane and to act as an undercover agent. Not far away, the fierce battle between the Death Rider and the human demon continued. The War Rider rushed to assist, leaving the human demon at a disadvantage. Thankfully, Abby returned with a repeating rifle just in time. The War Rider was drawn away, and seizing the opportunity, the human demon threw the Death Rider onto a farm tool. Just as he was about to finish him off, he heard Abby's chicken cry for help and rushed to rescue her, again entangled with the War Rider. Back to Katrina, she hoped to persuade Crane not to hurt their son Henry. She hoped that Henry could repent. Her words touched Crane. After bidding each other farewell, Crane quickly left the cabin. After meeting with Abby, the two drove away. The Death Rider returned to the house, thinking Katrina had already escaped, but looked up to see that she was still there and even expressed her unwavering loyalty to him. Back in their cabin, Crane and the others waited for the human demon to return, but could only hope that he would vanish with the Death Rider's skull. Although they were all saddened by Katrina's actions, what's done is done. They had to act according to the situation. Seeing Jenny and Abby, they hoped she would stay safe in jail. After all, they couldn't simultaneously fight against Moloch and the police. This made Jenny very sad. At the mental hospital, Irving prepared to undergo electroshock therapy under Lena's supervision. Henry, pretending to be a lawyer, came in and distracted Lena, telling Irving he needed to sign some documents. He handed him the tampered pen and successfully obtained his blood. Seeing the triumphant look on Henry's face, one can't help but wonder what wicked plans he might have in the future. When Crane and Abby arrived at the facility, they discovered that Henry had already contacted Irving. Abby got the number Henry used to book a cab. Crane was very curious, wondering why Henry, being the embodiment of the War Rider, was still operating in a human form rather than as a monster. They hoped Katrina would soon send useful information. Lena went to see Jenny. Thanks to Abby's efforts, Jenny received a lighter judgment and was assigned community service. In Lena's opinion, the sisters must be secretly involved in some unknown schemes. Following the cab lead, Crane and Abby arrived at a bank. They were unsure if the first wave of the War Rider's attack was aimed at destroying the financial system. Seeing his rebellious son, Crane was ready to teach Henry a lesson, but Abby stopped him, reminding him that domestic violence wouldn't help in stopping Moloch. Just then, gunshots were heard from inside the bank. After reporting to headquarters, Abby drew her gun and rushed in, only to find a bank teller robbing the bank. Upon seeing Abby, the teller's face darkened, and she claimed that after 15 years of dedicated service, she deserved everything. Abby's gentle persuasion was initially effective, but the strange shadow on the teller's face resurfaced, and she became agitated again. The arriving Lena shot her without a word. Abby was puzzled as to why a kind person would suddenly change in such a way. Perhaps it was related to the recently departed Henry. They did not notice a suspicious man in glasses not far away, who also had a strange shadow on his face. Now, to avoid Lena's investigation, Crane had to move through dark tunnels every day, going in and out of the archive room, which annoyed him. The surveillance data showed that Henry had only come to perform an exchange transaction and exhibited no suspicious behavior. Crane noticed that the teller started acting strangely after she touched a coin, even claiming it as her own. She then muttered to herself, saying that anyone who possesses this coin would fall into darkness. Crane recalled that during a secret mission, they had once infiltrated a counterfeit coin factory. They learned of a batch of special silver coins there, prepared to be recast and put into circulation. It was said that these coins had the ability to alter human nature. Given what happened to the bank teller, this seemed to be true. The same situation had previously occurred with a famous American general. Shortly after coming into contact with the coin, he plotted a defection. It appears that Henry brought these coins to help Moloch win the war in Sleepy Hollow. What's even more deadly is that these coins could now be in anyone's hands. Meanwhile, the man in glasses was busy making a bomb. The scene shifts to the Death Rider Brunt, expressing his dissatisfaction with Henry's unilateral actions. Katrina was not only gathering information, but also trying to sow discord between the two. Henry held a very firm stance, believing that his direct obedience to Moloch made him invincible. He saw through Katrina's intentions and warned her to stop. Katrina tried to awaken Henry's conscience, but it was in vain. Jenny sneaked into the archives to meet with her sister and Crane. Although they knew that Henry was the mastermind behind everything, they had no way to stop him. When the topic of the coin came up, Jenny mentioned a man named Nick, an expert in hunting and trading supernatural items, who did a lot of business by the river. Perhaps they could find some clues there. When finding out Lena had once had the two sisters' mother committed to a mental institution when they were young, Jenny exploded in anger. But Abby believed that Lena was only doing her duty, which once again led to friction between the two. By this time, the man in glasses had finished making the bomb, and a tragedy could happen at any moment. Abby and Crane found Nick by the river. After explaining their purpose, business was on the table. Nick made a big request, but Abby said they didn't plan to pay. Her domineering attitude was revealed. Nick then suggested a mutual help agreement, but the two turned to leave. Knowing business well, Nick revealed the origin of the silver coin, saying that he had indeed seen one. This piqued Crane's interest. It seemed this guy really knew some insider information. Back then, he'd seen a whole box full of them, a total of 30. The Bible also mentions these coins. They are the price Judas paid to betray Jesus. If the powers of 30 coins were used together, Henry might be able to establish an empire for Moloch. Afterward, the florist received a package, and the next moment, there was a huge explosion in the shop. It turned out that the man in glasses had sent the bomb to his own father. Abby realized that the man and the bank teller experienced the same sudden change in personality. The dark shadows on their faces were probably their dark sides being released. The man had been captured, and the coin should now be at the police station. Back at the station, they found out that the man's lawyer was Henry. However, Henry didn't intend to hide and didn't mind facing Crane. Crane blurted out a father-son dialogue, but Henry took it as a joke. He said that everyone has a dark seed in their hearts, and the coins just released them. Just as Henry left Crane, he was caught by Lena, who demanded Crane's identification. Abby went to the evidence room and discovered that the only thing left was a regular 25-cent coin. The guard said that the man's lawyer had just been there. Henry must have switched the coins. At this moment, Jenny discovered a coin on the ground and picked it up out of curiosity. Not far away, Henry was grinning wickedly. A dark shadow immediately appeared on Jenny's face. It seemed she had been manipulated, and Abby was her target. Nick said that Jenny had just come to him to borrow a gun, and her behavior seemed very strange. Since contact with the coin could hypnotize people, the issue became how to safely retrieve it. Nick suggested a solution. According to legend, only the sanctified glass of the church could counteract the power of the coin. Abby went to the community service center to find her sister, but found out that she had not checked in today. She had no choice but to confirm her sister's location through vehicle tracking. Meanwhile, at the church, Crane and Nick successfully retrieved the holy glass. Abby discovered that Jenny was driving towards the forest. Lena was hunting there. It seemed that her target was not her sister from the start, but the new Inspector Lena, who had their mother committed to a mental institution. The trio immediately rushed to the forest. According to Abby, Irving was now completely entranced by Henry, and he didn't believe that Katrina would harm her son. Elsewhere, Katrina took every opportunity to spar with Brunt, who seemed to be growing increasingly confused, unsure whether to trust Henry or his beloved woman. Nick quickly located Lena and found that Jenny was not far away, waiting for an opportunity to shoot. The trio split up. Nick led Lena away while Abby and Crane flanked from different directions. Abby quietly approached her hypnotized sister, trying to persuade her to stay true to herself and not be blinded by anger. Taking advantage of Jenny's wavering, Crane leaped forward and grabbed her sexy body. However, Abby was also seduced by the fallen silver coin. Fortunately, Crane kicked Nick away in time and used the holy glass to narrowly secure the coin. Jenny finally woke up after that. After the mission, Crane went to the mental hospital and told Irving that his so-called private lawyer was actually Henry, who was not only one of the four horsemen, but also his and Katrina's biological son. The key point was not to trust him, but Irving simply wouldn't listen to these words. All he hoped for now was for Henry to help him get out as soon as possible. Crane knew that even if Henry did this, there must be ulterior motives. Lena called Abby and handed her mother's files from the mental hospital. Through these records, Abby discovered that her mother had suffered a great deal in the past to protect her young daughters. Nick followed, and to their surprise, had swallowed the silver coin himself. He was planning to collect the whole set and make a fortune. Before leaving, he left a consolation prize for the two. It's the fake identification for Crane. Unexpectedly, Abby trusted Nick quite a bit. Now that the War Riders' plot had been completed, they had to unite all forces and act according to circumstances. The scene shifts to Crane, who is complaining about how driving is more challenging than being on the battlefield. His only driving lessons were from Jenny, whose license has been suspended multiple times. However, once he learns that cars are the modern equivalent of a knight's steed, Crane becomes enthusiastic, shouting, "One with the Ferrari horse," as he starts the engine, scaring Abby in the passenger seat. After they get out of the car, they receive news about a local child gone missing. As it was shown earlier, the little girl wandered outside as if sleepwalking, following the sound of a flute into the forest. Abby knows the Lancaster family, and as a police officer, she goes to investigate. The parents say their daughter Sarah is obedient and sensible, and there are no signs of forced entry in their home. Sarah is their only daughter, adopted after they had 3 sons, but their relationship is harmonious, ruling out the possibility she ran away. The mother is full of self-blame, believing her carelessness caused her not to notice her daughter's disappearance. She sits alone on a swing, hoping for Sarah's return. Crane discovers that the family has artifacts from the Lancaster lineage. In his memory, Lancaster was always an evil man. When Abby finds Crane trespassing, she angrily tells him to wait in the forest. In the forest, Crane tells Abby about the history of the Lancaster family. According to him, they were not patriots. They only pledged allegiance at the end of the war, a move that Washington would have despised. Abby, however, thinks that the descendants of the Lancaster family, who have been funding forest conservation projects, aren't all bad. They find a trail of blood, clear signs of a struggle, and a leg bone that Crane identifies as a bone flute. He starts to play it, and the sound lures Abby towards the lake, even though it seems like solid ground to her. Luckily, Crane pulls her back just in time, but she has no memory of what just happened. Realizing the little girl, Sarah didn't just get lost, but was lured into the forest by a mythical creature, the Pied Piper. Crane records the sound of the flute, noting that it's half a tone higher than regular flutes. Unlike the Pied Piper of Hamelin from the fairy tales, they are dealing with a real-life monster. In the most chaotic times of war, a mysterious man lured an entire troop out of their camp with just a song, leading to their annihilation. This man is the lethal Pied Piper. Because the methods are similar, the one who killed the soldiers and the one who lured Sarah away might be the same person. Crane asks Abby to recall the details from when she was entranced. She says it felt like she was being forced to go somewhere, a summoning spell that would lead victims to the Pied Piper's den. Abby suggests she could act as bait. If the flute's sound plays again, she can follow it to the Piper's den, potentially leading them to the little girl. Crane thinks they can record the flute's sound on a phone and have Abby listen to it on repeat through headphones. This way, she can be led to the destination without affecting the surrounding environment. When the flute's sound plays, Abby becomes entranced and starts walking, but Crane notices a shadow nearby. He removes her headphones, and Abby snaps out of her trance. She raises her gun to check and finds the treasure hunting expert Nick with an injured leg. Nick says Sarah is still alive, but they need to act fast. It turns out Nick was on a mission the previous night when he saw Sarah being taken away. He was attacked immediately after. His mission was to find the bone flute. He knew it was Sarah's 10th birthday, and according to the curse, the Lancaster family has always had a streak of bad luck. In 1778, an entire British troop was stationed in their house. The patriarch Lancaster, furious because they had harassed his daughter, hired the Pied Piper to lead the soldiers to their death. Because he sold his soul to the devil, the Pied Piper was swift and deadly. But when Lancaster betrayed him, the Piper cursed his family. Every time a girl in the Lancaster family turns 10, the Piper lures her into the forest and uses their bones to make his flutes. Each flute has a unique effect on its victims. Nick's words confirmed Crane's suspicion. If the Piper's soul was bought by Moloch, his body would resurrect. Indeed, the monster who kidnapped Sarah and decimated the army was one and the same. Now less than 36 hours remain. During this time, they still have a chance to rescue Sarah. Upon seeing the bone flute, dollar signs filled Nick's eyes. Given his love for money, Abby made a deal with him using the bone flute. If he helps rescue Sarah, he can take the flute. Under Abby's guidance, the three of them made a discovery. The location appeared to be the foundation of an old building with a secret room underneath. They went in, and at the end of the tunnel, they found the missing Sarah. While searching around, Nick encountered the Piper hidden in the darkness, surrounded by animal corpses. He fired off his gun in a panic until he ran out of bullets. Despite their efforts, Crane and Nick were unable to harm the Piper, who moved too quickly. Just as the Piper prepared to collapse the tunnel with a swing of his weapon, Nick threw a bomb to prevent the collapse. As they retreated, they also set a timed bomb. Although the Piper was buried in the dirt, it only delayed him. Upon seeing the monster, Nick immediately demanded more money. A single bone flute couldn't soothe his terrified heart. Now that he knew supernatural creatures truly existed, he saw a rise in his career as a magic artifact dealer on the horizon. Wanting to live to enjoy it, he decided not to participate in any further action. He intended to leave with the bone flute, but in his excitement, he forgot the flute was still in Abby's hands. Abby broke the flute, explaining he was merely too excited, and his hand shook. After all, such a powerful weapon in the hands of a greedy person like Nick was too dangerous. Nick left, red with envy, and wished them well. Crane and Abby returned Sarah to her family and began preparations to completely eliminate the Piper. With noise-canceling headphones, they wouldn't be affected by the Piper's music. Crane thought Sarah's mother reacted strangely when her daughter returned home. Her response was too calm for a mother whose child was rescued. Abby didn't think much of it. They looked through the Lancaster family's list of missing persons from the past century and found a pattern. After a little girl goes missing and is found, the other children in the family will soon die of fever. It seems the 3 adopted boys might be the next victims. Bad news arrives. One of the boys is in a coma from a high fever. If left untreated, all 3 children could face danger. Sarah's mother was in a dilemma, unsure whether to give Sarah back to the Piper. Armed with the Lancaster family's ancestral sword, they hurriedly headed to the forest where they found the mother's car. After a lot of persuasion, they convinced the desperate mother to give up the idea of sacrificing her daughter. The Piper appeared just then, and as the little girl was about to be attacked, Abby fired her gun to repel the monster. Crane chased after the Piper to his lair. He put on his headphones and charged in, but fell during the fight and lost his headphones. The deafening sound struck him, causing his ears to bleed. Crane, summoning all his strength, got back up and fought the Piper again, even managing to cut off one of his arms with the sword. Abby arrived just in time, picked up the Piper's enormous bone flute, and dealt the monster a fatal blow. Inside the bar, Nick hands the broken bone flute to the buyer, who turns out to be the shadowy figure he'd been dealing with, Henry. He grinds the flute into powder and tastes a bit of it, looking very satisfied. In a side plot, Irving is reading a book about the 4 horsemen in a mental hospital. He has a vision of himself in an apocalyptic slaughter, and when he comes to, the book in his hand starts to burn. He finally believes that Henry is the horseman of war and decides to end their partnership. However, Henry threatens to cut off the funds for Irving's wife and daughter's living expenses and their treatment fund, hoping that they could become partners. Irving initially disdains the idea, but Henry tells him to look for the answer in the Bible. It turns out he had Irving sign a contract with a special pen, making a pact in blood. In that way, Moloch has taken Irving's soul. The scene shifts to Crane having a romantic encounter with a beautiful young woman, Caroline, who is smitten with his vintage look. The passionate modern woman scares the middle-aged man, but the untimely arrival of Abby saves him from the awkward situation. Elsewhere, the trapped Katrina is desperately trying to send out messages. The long wait has made Brunt impatient, hoping Katrina will soon agree to be his bride. Suspecting that Katrina is secretly using magic, Brunt asks Henry to investigate. Henry agrees and even offers to conduct the marriage ceremony for them. It turns out that the blending of Katrina's and Brunt's blood hasn't happened yet. Brunt, however, is very confident in his charm and believes he can win Katrina's heart. As night falls, a couple is shaking their bodies in their car when a dark shadow suddenly crashes into the windshield. Meanwhile, the gentlemanly Crane and Abby are staking out Caroline's house, insisting on apologizing in person for a previous misunderstanding. After Crane leaves, Caroline returns home and hears a woman's eerie crying from her room. A figure wrapped in black gauze, radiating a black aura, lunges at her without mercy. The next day, the police find Caroline's body on the riverbank. Crane is very sad to hear the news. After all, the deceased was one of his few friends in this era. Abby finds the circumstances of Caroline's death very strange. All the details are contrary to common sense. They decide to investigate themselves. Following the river upstream, they find a discarded water cup indicating that Caroline had been there. Nearby, tire tracks also prove that there had been a witness the previous night. Following the clues, they come to a high school and find the young couple who were by the river the previous night. Although they didn't witness the situation, they believe it was the work of the legendary Weeping Lady. This local legend tells of a girl who drowned in the river and became a ghost. She drips water and her eyes shine green. She's always weeping because she was abandoned by her lover. To get more clues, they start searching for information in the library. During this time, Katrina's Raven delivers a letter to Crane saying she is fine. Abby encounters Nick, who is investigating the ghost incident from the previous night. Nick is a funny guy, always twisting the situation to his advantage. When Abby spots a woman in black at the end of the bookshelf, she realizes danger is near. She walks over with her gun drawn. The woman slowly gets up and turns around. It's the Weeping Lady. She pounces on Abby unexpectedly, and the next second they both fall into the water and wet themselves. Abby struggles desperately and realizes they're in the river. Crane rushes over after hearing the gunshot. Just as Abby is about to lose consciousness, Crane pulls her out of a water hole that mysteriously appears on the ground. In the book, Crane stumbled upon a new mystery. The original legend, dating back to 1779, tells of a young maiden overcome by sorrow who drowned herself in a river, her restless spirit haunting the site of her death ever since. As evidenced by the incidents involving Abby and Caroline, this ghost seemed to have a particularly keen interest in those close to Crane. During her struggle, Abby ripped a piece of the ghost's shawl, which bore a unique pattern. The owner of this shawl was a girl Crane had known many years prior. It's Mary. This same Mary had once sworn undying love to him. In essence, the families of Crane and Mary had been long acquainted, and the two of them had grown up together like two peas in a pod. When Mary learned that her beloved Crane saw her as nothing more than a sister, she was devastated. Her reaction was intense, demanding that Crane meet her at the hotel by the wharf before daybreak, or bear the consequences. However, Crane believed that Mary had heeded his advice. For the very next day, he received a letter from her. In it, she forgave Crane and said that she would return to England alone. After that, they lost contact. Abby speculated that Mary may never have left, but instead drowned in the river at Sleepy Hollow, haunting the town for the past 200 years. This theory explained the attacks on Caroline and herself. Crane also shared that part of the reason he'd broken off the engagement with Mary was due to her intense jealousy. Indeed, after breaking off his engagement, he had stolen the fiancée of his good friend Brunt. Abby mentioned that in local lore, the character Weeping Lady was always portrayed as gentle and harmless. Something must have enraged her to the point of manifesting physically. Speaking of Katrina, Crane remembered a note brought by the Raven, but he couldn't locate it, likely lost while saving Abby. Now that the Weeping Lady knew of Katrina's well-being and her intimate relationship with Crane, Katrina would surely be the next target. The situation was dire, and the note had ended up in someone else's hands. The two then sought out weapons from Nick, but he and Crane didn't get along and ended up arguing, wrestling their tongues. Thankfully, Abby was there to mediate. Nick produced an ancient crossbow, rumored to have been owned by the famous Van Helsing. Paired with specially made bolts, it was guaranteed to give demons a swift end. As night fell, the Weeping Lady went after Katrina. Fearing to alert the Death Rider, Abby and Crane lay in ambush not far away. Before long, the Death Rider charged out on his horse, axe in hand. Abby and Crane rushed into the house only to find Katrina gone. All that was left was a damp note on the floor indicating the weeping lady had succeeded in taking Katrina. Abby remembered the river she saw when she fell into the water. The scene switched and the advantages of witchcraft began to show. Seaweed at the riverbed seized the weeping lady like snakes, allowing Katrina to swim away and escape into the forest. Abby and Crane followed closely behind. Crane explained the situation, suspecting this was another of Henry's tricks. The only way to calm the weeping lady's soul now was to break the curse with witchcraft. As the screams grew closer, the women hid to cast the spell while Crane distracted the weeping lady. The equipment from Nick only served to provoke the ghost, who passed through Crane and charged at Katrina. The spell was successfully activated, and the black aura surrounding the weeping lady dissipated, revealing Mary's true form. Crane embraced her, explaining what had happened all those years ago, and wanting to know why she stayed in Sleepy Hollow. Mary pointed at Katrina, leaving Crane confused. Katrina stammered out an explanation, suggesting Mary might still be jealous of her. But Mary was a very stubborn woman. She wouldn't have returned to England so easily. After some thought, Crane realized Katrina must have done something behind the scenes. It turned out that Mary had arranged a private meeting with Katrina by the river. Mary had accused Katrina of wrongdoing, quickly becoming hysterical and accidentally falling off a cliff. She had stopped breathing immediately. Katrina then used magic to forge a letter to Crane, saying that Mary forgave him and she would return to England alone. Though his wife constantly defended her actions as well-intentioned, Crane was livid. Just as he was about to explode, the Death Rider arrived. Without hesitation, he swung his battle axe. Crane was left defenseless. Luckily, Katrina, being a skilled diplomat, stepped in to talk some nonsense. Remarkably, her words persuaded the Death Rider to stand down. Together, they returned to the forest, leaving Crane stunned and Abby speechless. It was their first time witnessing a Death Rider not resorting to violence. Jenny found Nick and returned his crossbow. It seemed they shared a hidden past. Jenny pecked him on the cheek before leaving Nick utterly puzzled. After attending Caroline's costume funeral, Crane realized that being a witness could push those around him into danger. Katrina's deception began to shake the trust between them, and he wasn't sure how to maintain their relationship moving forward. Katrina, having been found out for past actions, was feeling extremely low. Brunt explained that he had not been involved in the plan to bring back Mary. His visit to the riverside was purely out of concern for Katrina's safety. This made Katrina feel a little fondness towards him. In the Purgatory, Moloch was furious because in his grand scheme of things, Katrina was to play a crucial role. She must not be harmed before her mission is complete. He warned Henry to follow orders and keep everything under control. The scene shifts to an early morning when Abby was pushing Crane to practice yoga, but not the hormone one, claiming that every woman wants their man to be in good shape. But when Crane found out the exercise was to tone his buttocks, he shyly said he was embarrassed and he couldn't do this anymore. Ever since he last saw Katrina, he had been restless. Abby tried his best to guide him, hoping to teach this old chap, who was a bit silly due to the British feudal education, how to make sarcastic comments. But after discovering his wife's deception, it was hard for Crane to trust her like before. When exercise proved ineffective, they decided to drown their sorrows in alcohol. Crane needed to toast to Washington before he began drinking, which left everyone around him in chaos. He gulped down half a glass, indulging in the moment. It was strange that bar fights were common, and one of the fighters turned out to be the deceased officer Corbin's son, Joe. The young man had been serving abroad for years and had just returned to Sleepy Hollow. Abby treated him like a younger brother, but Joe held a grudge against her, blaming her for the death of his father. Abby was hurt and said things were not as he thought. Joe drove off, leaving a message saying never to contact him again. Despite the strained relationship between Corbin and his son, they both considered Abby as family. Afterward, a noise complaint was reported at the command center, and the license plate number matched Joe's. Abby had to look after Joe. On the way, a deer-like creature dashed across the road. Abby and Crane got out of the car to investigate. The footprints on the ground looked human, and not far away, two men lay dead in the wilderness, one of them horrifically disemboweled. Crane found Joe unconscious. When he woke up, he cried, repeatedly saying the killer was coming for him. Abby asked Joe about his situation, but Joe refused to cooperate, blaming Abby for depriving him of his father's love. At the mental hospital, Irving found his soul had been stolen. Irving confronted Henry, vowing to find a way to reclaim his soul. Henry told him that he could break the contract by killing. A perpetrator had once caused Irving's daughter to be paralyzed for life. Killing the perpetrator would serve both revenge and contract dissolution. Irving insisted he wouldn't kill out of hatred, but Henry confidently stated that if a person gazes too long into hell, the abyss will gaze back at him. Crane spent half the day reviewing information, but found no clues about the deer-like creature they saw last night. He found Joe suspicious, and likely more than just a victim. Firstly, Joe knew about his father's exorcism, and secondly, all his companions were killed while he remained unharmed. Moreover, a report from the military unit Joe previously served in revealed an incident identical to the previous night's. The entire rank had died with mutilated bodies, leaving only Joe alive. More suspiciously, one soldier's organs had been hollowed out, or possibly eaten. In 1778, Crane's close friend led local immigrants on a hunt. It was said that the friend's younger brother, Boone, suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder. In the most desperate times in battle, good men were forced to become beasts, even resorting to cannibalism. Upon returning home, Boone even attacked his own brother, leaving him to wear a hat for life to cover the scars. The local tribe of the Indians believed they could cure Boone, attributing his condition to the curse of the Wendigo, a mythical cannibal from the local tribes. This creature, possessing both human and monster traits, has an extreme thirst for human blood. Once its desire is triggered, it begins to transform, only reverting back to human form after consuming the organs of its victims. This led them to suspect that Joe could be the Wendigo. Meanwhile, news arrived from the hospital saying that Joe had disappeared. The two arrived at his residence and found Corbin's dying will, leaving a few items to his son and instructing him to take good care of them. One piece of material used encrypted numbers, which were coordinates pointing to Pioneer Point, the scene of the previous night's tragedy. Joe wasn't hunting, but searching for something his father had left behind. Upon seeing Joe, Abby told him they already knew about his situation. Joe became agitated and ran deep into the woods. When Crane tried to stop him, his palm was scratched. The smell of fresh blood immediately affected Joe. He warned the two to run away immediately as his body began to mutate. Despite Abby shooting tranquilizers at him, Joe continued chasing Crane until the last dart hit the monster and it fell unconscious. They brought it back to the dungeon of the Freemasons. Nick was called over as he claimed to have a cure, but the risk was too high for him to try easily. Jenny stole organs from the medical school's cadavers to feed Joe, who quickly reverted back to human form. Looking around at his environment, Joe finally believed that Abby and the others could help him, so he recounted his recent experiences. It turns out he had received a mysterious letter covered in white powder, which was likely human bone subjected to black magic. The letter said he had been cursed and needed to exchange his father's relic to break it. At first, Joe thought it was a prank until he transformed and killed all his companions during a mission. It wasn't until the night at Pioneer Point after being discharged and returning home when he confirmed that human blood was the trigger for his transformation. Without a doubt, the only one who set Joe up is Henry. The item in Corbin's box must be very important to him. Upon opening the box shaped like a bronze tripod, Crane discovered it was filled with golden silkworms. Listening to Crane's bloody narrative about cultivating and using these parasites, Abby praised him. They now had to find a cure before Henry could catch up with them. Despite the urgency, Crane found time to apologize to Joe, stating that his son, who was 10 years and 720 months old, was going through a rebellious phase. Although his son had done many wrong things, as a father, he could not abandon his love for him. Joe, who had never experienced fatherly love, was indifferent to life and death. He only hoped that whatever the outcome, Crane would express his love for his son personally. While seeing Abby and Nick getting closer, Crane felt a pang of jealousy. Abby found out that Wendigo could only transform 4 times, and after the final transformation, the change would be irreversible. Joe would be forever trapped in the form of a monster. Time was pressing and the situation complicated. Katrina seemed unable to help, and Nick suddenly appeared again, claiming to know a few members of the local tribe. Although Crane was unhappy under Abby's strong command, he had to follow Nick and try his luck. As Crane had anticipated, the cunning Nick had indeed sold the precious masks of the tribe. Despite the accusations from the tribespeople who had become a biker gang, Nick generously admitted that he had exchanged the masks for a beachfront villa. Crane managed to avoid a fight and even persuaded their shaman to help save Joe, winning a round against Nick. As Abby and Joe recalled the past, Joe finally felt his father's profound love. Henry barged in with his Hessian mercenaries, trying to get the box. To protect Abby and Jenny, Joe was prepared to hand over the parasite poison. Henry lied about taking Joe to lift the curse and successfully created a rift between the group. Joe followed him outside. There, Henry injured Joe, saying he would save him from his cursed humanity and let him live forever as a monster. On the other side, Irving found the perpetrator who hurt his daughter. Free from his duty as a police inspector, Irving decided to take revenge himself. At the last moment, he realized that acting impulsively was devilish. If he stained his hands with blood, he would fall into Henry's trap. Meanwhile, Crane received a method to lift the curse from the local shaman. All he needed was to get Joe's blood with an obsidian dagger, put it into a skull and chant a spell, but it had to be done before Joe killed again. If he failed, the obsidian dagger could also kill Joe. On the streets, Abby and Crane cut their palms, preparing to lure Joe into the tunnel using the smell of blood. Nick was ready for the worst. When Wendigo appeared to flex its monstrous figure, Abby risked her life as bait, and Crane took the opportunity to get the blood. However, after chanting the spell, Wendigo showed no reaction. Therefore, Crane prepared to kill it with the dagger, but Abby insisted on not giving up. As they reached an impasse, Wendigo began to transform, slowly turning back into Joe. Afterward, Abby took Joe to the base of the Demon Extermination Squad. Joe finally understood his father's lifelong efforts and dedication. By this time, Crane had become addicted to online games, swearing and losing all his gentlemanly demeanor. In the end, Abby recommended Joe for further study at a military academy. Irving called, saying he felt like he was part of Moloch's army of evil and now found demons very attractive. He hoped Abby could save him. Up until now, Henry had done so many bad things and hurt almost everyone they cared about. However, Crane still hoped to fight to save his demonized son. The blood of the golden silkworms gradually coagulated, eventually turning into a colorful spider. Taking advantage of Katrina's sleep, it crawled directly into her abdomen. Clearly, Henry used the golden silkworms to curse Katrina, causing her to have hallucinations. The terrifying images in her dreams left her in constant fear. Katrina was increasingly worried because she wasn't sleeping well and felt as if there was poison inside her. Upon hearing his love talk like this, Brunt swore to clear her name. Accompanied by the Hessian mercenaries, Henry confirmed that the spell had taken effect and wanted to take Katrina away. Even Brunt, who tried to stop him, was quickly subdued by him using sunlight. However, Katrina took the opportunity to escape and was saved by the gas station staff. At the same time, Crane and Abby received news about a woman dressed in colonial-era attire being taken to the hospital. The two knew something unexpected had happened to Katrina. Katrina's situation was bad. She was running a high fever and there were signs of infection in her abdomen. The cause of the illness was undetermined. They only knew this was part of Henry's plan. When Katrina lifted her clothes, her abdomen showed black veins, symptoms eerily similar to the mysterious disease spread by the plague rider. The illness was aggressive. They learned from Henry that it was Moloch's instigation. Without further ado, Katrina was taken out of the hospital room by Crane. When they saw the Hessian mercenaries blocking the way, Abby suggested she would go to gather information and then meet up in the police archive room. Katrina set up a magic circle that would trigger an alarm if Henry and his men approached. They recalled details about the willow forest, and the doctor brought by Henry had a book with a goat pattern on it. That was the symbol of the Hellfire Club. Franklin had once infiltrated it. He quoted an experiment about a woman who was infected with a mysterious disease similar to Katrina's, but there was no further introduction. Overhearing his wife talking about Brunt in a somewhat tender tone, Crane was curious about what a lonely man and woman could chat about in the forest. Fortunately, Katrina was behaving well, speaking sweetly, and expressing her loyalty to him. Abby discovered a doctor entering an abandoned warehouse where they were studying a stone tablet. A fully equipped hospital room was even set up. On her way out, Abby casually took a notebook. She looked at the photos on her phone and compared them with the contents of the notebook. They were looking for a host for something. Katrina was currently in the early stages of infection. In 10 to 12 hours, the host would either give birth or die. Katrina, who had been living apart from Crane for a long time and even shared a room with a rival, was surprisingly pregnant. Without saying anything more, Crane slammed the table. Upon reading the notes, it turned out that the seed of birth came from the golden silkworms, which was the poison that Henry had taken from Crane previously. The witch had been using this thing to feed the devil, so what Katrina was carrying was not human. The magic circle was activated, indicating an enemy attack. The three of them fled into a secret passage with the mercenaries in hot pursuit. Fortunately, the tunnels were interconnected, allowing them to escape successfully. They followed the tunnel to an abandoned church, which was precisely where Katrina had sent Henry away years ago. She hoped he wouldn't send people to search here. Katrina suddenly thought that Henry was the Sin Eater. Perhaps only he could drive out the devil inside her. Although the other two thought this idea was unrealistic, Katrina believed that her son still retained his humanity. They had no choice but to seek help from Henry, which seemed to be the only option. So later, Crane tricked Henry into the mental hospital through Irving. In the church, Abby discovered that the monster inside Katrina was known as the terrifying Demon Lord. As time passed, Katrina's reactions became more intense. Through their conversation, Crane discovered that the whole thing wasn't as simple as it seemed. In fact, this demon lord, bred from human blood and the tears of parents, was actually Moloch. The demon lord was about to be reborn in the world. Katrina wanted to end her pregnant life to prevent the birth, but Abby's words gave her the courage to live on. Crane still hoped to awaken Henry's humanity, but instead of returning to his parents, Henry chose to continue following Moloch's leadership. He let Crane feel the despair of his own childhood. His tragic experiences had completely eradicated his heart as a son. Upon returning to the church, Crane and Katrina began their farewells. Abby remembered the stone tablet she had glimpsed in the warehouse. Crane identified the projection from the tablet as an aurora, so they sought on the internet for methods to exorcise demons with an aurora. Franklin's writings suggested that to stop Moloch's resurrection, he had constructed the aurora prism, hidden within the tablet. Once it was exposed to sunlight, it would emit an aurora, expelling the demon before its birth. However, the tablet was heavily guarded, so they had to seek help. Abby returned to the police station, concocted a story about an end-of-the-world cult, and persuaded Inspector Lena to dispatch officers to the warehouse to combat terrorist activities. Amidst the firefight, Crane, despite his understanding of the history of dark forces, was unable to open the password box. It was only when they pressed 666 that they successfully retrieved the tablet. Because they discovered this hideout, Lena started to trust Abby, and Crane also temporarily gained approval. Back at the church, labor had begun. They shattered the tablet, obtained the prism, and projected the aurora onto Katrina's abdomen through the window. In the nick of time, they prevented the birth of Moloch. Due to the physical contact, Crane realized that Henry was still a lost little boy at heart and decided not to give up on redeeming him. Meanwhile, the power of lightning was collected into a bottle, and another of Henry's plans was about to begin. The scene shifts to an early morning when Crane and his wife were discussing their views on love while watching a Daniel C. drama. Since Katrina's return, only Abby had been saving the Earth during this period. Henry arrives at a grim and scary abandoned building. He retrieves a human heart from a ceramic jar. As he chants a spell, a beauty appears out of nowhere. Henry assigns her a new task. Although the specifics of the task are unknown, it's certainly not good news. The beauty arrives at a nightclub and transforms into the object of a man's secret admiration. With a few words, she lures the man outside. As they were shaking their bodies in the car, her appearance suddenly changes. The beauty sucked the life force out from the man's mouth, leaving behind a shriveled and deformed corpse. Meanwhile, Brunt is very angry about Katrina's disappearance, and his relationship with Henry is deteriorating. The beauty returns and releases the life force into a glass bottle. She and Henry's master need more nourishment. Crane and Abby are clueless about the recent mysterious deaths in the town. Katrina discovers that the black hole on the corpses is the main vein through which life force flows, which significantly narrows the search range. Due to frequent visions of Henry in a baby crib recently, Crane's mental state isn't good. Crane tries to be attentive to his wife, but she only wants to drink citrus tea, which is hard to find at the moment. Katrina mentions that Brunt often bought her tea during such times. The priority right now is to take his wife home to rest, while the Earth can be saved later. Suddenly, Abby is left alone in the records room, talking to herself. The beauty has reappeared, this time setting her sights on the blonde who just got friend-zoned. Another body has been discovered, marking the second case tonight alone. Comparing with the sketches in Franklin's notebook, Crane realizes that this adversary is far more complex. It's time to seek expert assistance. As carefree as ever, the treasure hunter Nick decides to visit Abby in the middle of the night, hoping to get something smelly. Upon realizing it's merely a scholarly discussion on the supernatural, he leaves Abby behind and immediately begins hunting for new prey. At the moment, Crane makes a new finding. The first victim's body was found in the back seat of a car, indicating they were in the midst of an intense hormone yoga. The two realize that the monster this time is a succubus, a creature that seduces its victims to prolong its own life. Succubi can see through people's desires, and the stronger the desire, the faster they feed. They can transform into the object of their prey's deepest longing while releasing a mysterious energy. Therefore, magic could be used to track their location. Right now, she's at the docks, near Nick's boathouse. Upon reaching the boathouse, Nick is already wrestling with the succubus. Unable to wait for Crane's aid, Nick uses a magical artifact to force the succubus to release him. As Abby and Crane close in from both sides, the succubus flees. The situation is becoming increasingly complex. First, there was the golden silkworm, then the Wendigo. Henry's plan is incredibly thorough, with each step having a clear purpose. Now that he's released the succubus, it's unclear what his next move might be. Lately, Crane has indeed been quite distracted. One moment, he's apologizing for only having eyes for his wife, and the next, he's attempting to play matchmaker between Abby and Nick. Abby is disheartened. In her hallucination, Katrina sees Henry feeding a baby again. This sensation is very strange, as if her newborn child has been sent elsewhere. As a mother, she can feel it at any time. According to the data, succubi usually only feed once a month. The current frequency of attacks is clearly abnormal. Everyone analyzes from Katrina's hallucination that what she's seeing is actually happening. It turns out the succubus and Henry are using human life forces to feed the baby. The baby in the crib is Moloch, who was originally in Katrina's belly and disappeared after being exposed to the aurora. It seems that the aurora prism simply transferred the baby in her belly elsewhere instead of killing it. This connects with the last episode, where Henry collected lightning energy into a bottle. On the other side, the three argue about whether Henry's soul can still be saved before continuing their work. It turns out that this succubus, devoid of any desires of her own, is able to keenly perceive the desires of others. Her heart is not located within her physical form. Only by destroying the heart can she be eliminated. In the 3rd century, a Roman preacher was the first to kill a succubus. Because of this great achievement, the preacher was canonized as Saint Valentine. Now, the heart of the succubus is likely hidden in a sacred place. Henry has recently been in and out of a cemetery. If a demon wants to hide an important organ, that place would indeed be an excellent choice. With a clue in hand, Crane decides to go to the cemetery alone to destroy the heart, while his partner is tasked to protect his wife. To find the enemy who has never shown a human face, he enlists the help of Nick, who brings him directly to the Electric Butt Club. According to him, this place is a treasure trove of resources for monsters. Sure enough, the succubus appears again, and another night of murder is about to unfold amidst the neon lights and revelry. In the cemetery, Abby and Katrina are still debating whether motherly love can overcome demonic nature. Accidentally, they discover a grave that has been protected by a blessing spell. Crane and Nick, aided by a unique sense, find the succubus, but she also discovers them. In a flash, Nick hands Crane the Nordic sword, and then remarks he's never used it before and wishes him luck. They begin to surround the succubus from different directions. Given that the heart is the only weak point of the succubus, they can only hope that Katrina finishes her work soon so that they can launch an attack. Crane follows the succubus into a warehouse, but she is ready to trap the hunter. They find a pottery jar, but when they open it, Abby and Katrina see different things. Abby sees maggots while Katrina sees rats. It seems like they've both been tricked. Abby guesses that there's nothing in the jar and reaches her hand in, successfully retrieving the heart. Katrina begins to cast a spell, but is injured by the runes on the jar, and the spell is interrupted. Crane's dagger attack is completely ineffective. Fortunately, Nick appears in time, fires her gun, and stops the succubus's feeding. Crane barely escapes with his life. With the Latin she learned in high school, Abby takes over the chanting of the spell. Finally, at the critical moment, the heart is burned, and the succubus's body is reduced to ashes by the bullets. After this battle, the relationship between the two men begins to thaw. Katrina finally agrees with Abby that Henry must be stopped and his sins must be accounted for. However, she feels that only by killing Moloch can they put an end to this once and for all. She volunteers to return to Brunt to look for opportunities for a final victory. Nick is officially accepted by Crane and taken back to the cabin at the Trout Lake to heal her wounds. His wife's self-sacrifice gives him a new perspective on the duty of a witness. After that, Katrina returned, and Brunt brought her to Henry. Unexpectedly, Henry is not angry. He simply lets Katrina look at the baby crib, inside of which is a beautiful little baby. But the strange green light on the necklace shows that what Katrina sees may not necessarily be the truth. The scene shifts to Abby having a dream where her mother warns her to be wary of demons, but with no details. Crane, recently down with the flu, disregards Abby's concerns and insists on working despite his illness. For an unexplainable reason, Abby has been dreaming about meeting her mother in Purgatory for the past week. Considering her mother ended her life due to torment by demons, the two worry this might be an ominous premonition. They force Crane to rest while Abby returns to the police station for a mission. It turns out the mental hospital has reported 3 suicides in consecutive nights, catching Inspector Lena's attention. Previously, Abby had helped to crack a cult case, and given that her mother killed herself in that very hospital, she is the best candidate for this case. Granted complete authority, Abby enlists Jenny's help. Upon arrival at the hospital, a mental patient takes a keen interest in Abby, causing her to shiver with unease and wet her pants. While it can't be ruled out that the 3 victims' previous conditions may have resurfaced, their treatments had been going smoothly, and there were no signs of suicidal tendencies before their deaths. The situation is perplexing. Abby first needs to rule out the suspicion of Irving as the culprit, who had already lost his soul. After all, Henry once said that the only way to reclaim a soul is through killing. Irving assures Abby that he can still take care of himself. He even chose his favorite flavored jelly for breakfast. He promises to assist Abby with the investigation from within the mental hospital. There are security cameras everywhere in the hospital. Everyone is under 24-hour surveillance. However, it seems Jenny had a not-so-bad past here. She had seen her mother in this place and knew the rules of the hospital at a very young age. Abby's mother's death has always been a thorn in her side, and she hopes to use this opportunity to investigate. The surveillance footage shows a woman hiding in the corner of the room the night the first victim ended her life. It's Abby and Jenny's mother. From their childhood, their mother was unusually vigilant about everything, always concerned that a demon might harm them when least expected. The question is, why would she return 15 years later, appearing to be driving people to their deaths? As Crane is down with a cold, Abby asks Nick for help. Crane is irked by Nick's smug demeanor, despite enjoying the delicious takeout she brings. According to his research, the mental hospital is built on a special road that leads to the intersection between the human world and Purgatory. Now that the baby Moloch has been born, this road is likely cursed. Abby's mother may be trying to undermine their morale. Perhaps the combined stress of his cold and Nick is too much for Crane. Hearing that Katrina hasn't yet killed Moloch, Crane starts to get neurotic. On top of that, Nick had added some sedative to his soup so he won't be waking up anytime soon. Henry says the infant in the bed is an abandoned baby he adopted, hoping it would give Katrina the warmth of raising a child. The little baby is cute and chubby, but in reality, it is nothing less than a genuine devil. All these are illusions created by the necklace. At the moment, the mental patient smashes a mirror to attempt suicide, but is subdued just in time. The phantom image of Abby's mother flashes in the room, and strangely, Abby disappears. In an instant, she finds herself in an abandoned hallway where shadows of people flit about. Her mother warns her to leave quickly. A nurse enters, saying the place induces hallucinations. This is the same woman who had been taking care of the mental patient. While looking for Abby, Jenny sees a string of text left by their mother, which appears to be a code for the hospital's surveillance archives. Katrina notices that places touched by the baby begin to blacken and sag, as if losing vitality. It seems there is indeed something wrong with this child. Fortunately, being a witch, Katrina has her own set of counterspells. Abby encourages her sister to bravely confront the past. The two sisters begin to watch the video where their mother reveals that many of her actions were instigated by a nurse named Gina, the same woman Abby just ran into in the corridor. But in reality, there is no such nurse at the hospital. The truth is clear. The real murderer who killed the others is someone else, not Abby's mother. Meanwhile, Gina approaches Irving. Under her bewitchment, Irving walks into the bathroom, fills the bathtub with water, and without hesitation, immerses himself. Even after Abby saves him, the urge to kill himself is still strong. Left with no choice, Abby stays up all night to guard him. Once he regains consciousness, Irving admits that Nurse Gina gave him some pills and managed to make the idea of suicide sound incredibly persuasive. As their investigation deepens, the trio discovers that Gina had taken the lives of 21 people nationwide, using the same method as now. However, she was executed by the electric chair back in 1959. This explains why Abby's mother kept claiming that she was fighting demons after being admitted to the mental hospital. They enter the room where the mother stayed during her hospitalization, which has been abandoned for many years. Peeling back the wallpaper, they are surprised to find Jenny's childhood drawings. It was on that day that mother and daughter nearly died in the garage. The mother appears again, saying there's an ancient spell that can stop Gina, but she can't recall it at the moment. It turns out she was trying to save lives, not kill. If they can find the diary containing the spell, they can put an end to all this. Gina appears suddenly and abducts Abby, effortlessly overpowering everyone. She takes Abby to the abandoned corridor, declaring that the scene of death will play out again. Jenny finds a notebook left by their ancestors in the archive room, which indeed contains a method to eliminate the death nurse. As Gina is about to force the medicine down Abby's throat, the mother appears and engages Gina in a muscle wrestling. At the same time, Jenny in the archive room loudly recites the spell. Just as Gina is about to strike, her body disintegrates and vanishes like toilet paper. The mother's ghost also disappears simultaneously. Following the method in the diary, they use the mother's belongings to successfully summon her spirit. Through her narration, the sisters finally understand their mother's strange behavior years ago and her attempts to stop Moloch. The diary contains important secrets and weapons, and the sisters must uncover them together moving forward. Irving finally escapes the mental hospital. Now, he needs to set things right outside and confront the enemy. Katrina turns petals into a demon-expelling potion, but when she sees the little boy again, he has surprisingly grown up. In just a few days, he has taken on the appearance of a 15-year-old and recognizes Katrina as his mother. The scene then shifts to Katrina establishing contact with Crane and Abby through the soul mirror. She failed to kill baby Moloch, and the situation has become even more complicated. According to Moloch's current growth rate, it will regain its full strength in less than 2 days. Fortunately, there's still a chance to stop it. In Abby's family diary, there is a record of a powerful weapon capable of defeating Moloch. Katrina, fearing discovery, hastily ends the conversation. Henry comes to the soul mirror. He seems to have known that Katrina would send a message out. Pressing the replay button, the mirror becomes a perfect eavesdropper, revealing Crane and Abby's plan to him. Demons are fallen angels. The diary's records about them are actually a cryptogram. When the letters are rearranged, it spells Enoch, an ancient Hebrew book containing legends about Methuselah. He was given a sword that could slay anything. If they can find the sword of Methuselah, they will have a weapon to fight Moloch. Crane discovers that Abby's ancestors used a mirror distortion encryption method, leaving behind a painting. It is a famous political cartoon, with the snake's head marking the location of the treasure on the map. Although they know the location and target, the journey there will undoubtedly be fraught with danger. The book says that unless one fully understands oneself, death will surely come. Learning of his opponent's plan, Henry sends out the Death Rider with orders to retrieve the sword before dawn. The long-idle Death Rider makes his move. The group arrives at the location where the sword is hidden. The buildings there astonishingly resemble the scene in Abby's dream. But before she can understand why, the Death Rider swoops in. Luckily, they manage to hide in time and avoid detection. Realizing that their opponent is also there for the sword, Abby can't help but charge in. The symbols carved on the lightning stele are a circle and a triangle. Accidentally knocking over a brick, the Death Rider is attracted by the noise. Crane steps forward and diverts the Death Rider. Luckily, the sun rises, and the sunlight drives the Death Rider away. Although the stele is taken away, the appearance of the Death Rider helps Crane understand himself more. He recalls that he and Brunt, the Death Rider, used to be good friends. Many of his own important decisions were influenced by Brunt's advice and encouragement, including the decision to come to America and join Washington. The test of Methuselah's sword is not just about overcoming external difficulties, but also challenging the people who have shaped their own destiny. The Death Rider persuades him to turn to the light, and his wife, Katrina, asks him to fulfill the mission of the Witness. Crane suddenly realizes that he has been led by the nose his whole life. It's time to stand firm and take control of his future. The patterns on the stele represent a snake biting its own tail, symbolizing as above, so below. This indicates that there are secrets underground. Opening the hidden iron door, there are winding stairs below. There are many human statues from various historical periods based on their clothing. Crane's intuition tells him there's a great danger hidden here. These statues are too lifelike. They were all real people, just turned into statues. They must leave this place at once. Just as the iron door closes, a serpentine monster pursues them. It is Medusa, universally recognized as a beauty at first glance. Nobody gets a second look. All the females in her family have died young, causing Abby's confidence to waver. Even though Crane is not good at comforting, his awkward conversation gives Abby a hint. Since they cannot confront Medusa directly, perhaps someone who has lost his head yet remains a formidable fighter can stand in for them. Crane is bewildered by that. The horn sound once sent shudders down people's spines, heralding the arrival of eternal warfare. Soon it will sound again after Moloch matures. Whether it's poisoning or other forms of resistance, Katrina and her allies cannot prevent the apocalypse. The Death Rider returns late at night, lured into the underground chamber by the duo. Ever since he got a rifle, the Death Rider seems to be uncomfortable with his heavy axe. This time, he just swings it symbolically before pulling out his rifle and striking a handsome pose. Predictably, the intrusion of outsiders lures out the snake monster again. Crane observes the situation through his phone. Abby makes a sarcastic remark, wondering if he wanted to take a selfie with Medusa. They seize the opportunity to explore deeper into the underground chamber. However, they find there's more than one sword down there. It seems that reaching this point, the trial is not over. Crane leaves Abby alone to choose a sword and goes out to delay the victorious monster. The point is to choose correctly the first time. This may also be part of the test. Even though they initially fall behind, the Death Rider quickly counterattacks. With one swing of his axe, he cuts off the snake monster's head, causing her to flee for her shitty life without covering her naked body. Then, the Death Rider discovers Crane. Just as he is about to flee, Brunt calls out his name. It turns out his head has somehow grown back. The prophecy has come true. Everyone in this place will reveal their true selves. Enraged at the theft of his wife, Brunt raises his gun to shoot. Crane, smooth talker as he is, convinces Brunt to use cold weapons instead. Dueling his old friend, they fight while chatting and exchanging bullshits. Until Crane gains the upper hand, the situation reverts back to the start. Brunt fires his gun and Crane scurries away. Inside the stone chamber, Abby pulls out a sword. All the swords transform into poisonous snakes, scattering in all directions. Brunt charges in and is about to attack, but the sound of the horn stops him. He decides to leave Crane behind so he can witness firsthand his sweet life with Katrina in the New Order. At the brink of life and death, Crane finally understands the true meaning of the prophecy. If one desires the sword, one must first destroy oneself. The oil in the stone basin can reflect a person's appearance. Lighting it means annihilation. Together they light the oil. Sure enough, the sword of Methuselah is within. Meanwhile, the ceremony to welcome Moloch is underway. As shown in the side plot, Jenny initially plans to escort Irving beyond the border, but Irving is determined to stay to protect his family. By staying in Sleepy Hollow, he can stay closer to the enemy. He decides to secretly resist the devil. It seems that in the future, Sleepy Hollow will have an additional force to fight evil. The scene shifts to Crane and Abby, armed with the sword, rushing toward the mansion where Henry resides. Now all they can hope for is that Katrina can hold him off until they arrive. Their engine is struck by lightning, and the car surprisingly breaks down. Strange phenomena occur, and everything is disrupted by strong electromagnetic interference. The situation is urgent. Since they can't rely on electronic devices, they have to resort to an old-fashioned motorcycle. Upon his first ride, Crane falls in love with these steel horses. The old mansion is eerily quiet and dark. They arrive and decide to investigate further. A giant sand table model marks all the places that have been attacked. By connecting these with a red line, a pentagram symbol is formed, identical to what they saw in Moloch's lair. It seems they are summoning a demon army. Katrina's cries for help come from outside. The Death Rider is performing a binding ceremony, which is basically similar to a ghost marriage. Crane, wielding the sword, displays great power and breaks the Death Rider's axe within a few rounds. Katrina casts a spell to amplify the power of her necklace. Now all three can see the Death Rider's face. The Death Rider says that any mortal who uses the holy sword will pay a price, their life. Just as Crane is about to act, inscriptions flash on the sword. That's the symbol of an angel. Perhaps the Death Rider is not lying. Although Katrina has a way to verify this, they don't have much time left. They take the Death Rider back to the dungeon. Crane is unsure if it's psychological, but seeing Katrina so close to another man makes him hormone jealousy. He wonders if his wife is doing this for him or to save the Death Rider. Jenny arrives with their family diary. It seems the Death Rider really wasn't lying. The user of the sword indeed faces backlash, a life for a life. So Jenny suggests that if the sword consumes souls, they should find someone whose soul already has a master. And yes, they think of Irving, who just escaped from the mental hospital. Being deceived by the woman he loves, the Death Rider feels wronged. Katrina says that she used to be a spy, but now it's time for him to be honest with her, for his own good. As they exchange nonsense, they draw closer together. But Crane can't sit still. He finds an excuse to call Katrina out. Since Irving using the sword won't cause harm, their focus should be on defeating Moloch and saving their friend. But Katrina insists on staying here to guard the Death Rider, wanting to gather more information. They disagree on whether it's necessary to kill Henry, as the fight will be intense, and any slight hesitation could lead to failure. The book of Genesis mentions a test of faith, asking a father to sacrifice his son. The situation seems similar here. Irving agrees to help. Jenny and Crane rush to meet him, while Abby is assigned to watch over Katrina and the Death Rider. In an abandoned military outpost, they find Irving. After a painful struggle, he is promised that his family will be taken care of. Irving then gives up his gun for the sword. When he confronts the Death Rider, his performance is impressive. He breaks every rule of civil interrogation. Finally, the Death Rider reveals that Moloch is at 4 white trees, which he suspects will all be black by now. The first tree brings light when it turns black, the second brings blood, the third brings a demonic army, and the fourth merges earth with hell. When Katrina sees Irving about to act, she tries to stop him. To confront the demon army, they need to arm themselves, so they find Nick for weapons. He wants to resist when he hears they need to empty his arsenal, but blood hail falls from the sky, leaving him speechless. Nick agrees to load the car immediately. Blackbeard's flintlocks and an ancient samurai sword are powerful, but to fully unleash their power, they must be fixed with a spell. Abby brings Nick to the secret room. After all, they can't win without considering their home base, and someone needs to keep an eye on the Death Rider. Moloch is dissatisfied with the absence of the Death Rider and decides to send out the first wave of demons, led by the War Rider. As soon as the two sides line up, they start fighting. Magic zombies also join the battle. Thankfully, they were prepared. Despite Abby being injured, they manage to defeat the enemy. Facing the enemy's general, they rely on the great sword in Irving's hand. With a grudge against his country and family, Irving roars like a goose and charges in. After a few exchanges, he slices off the War Rider's arm. Just as Irving is about to deliver the final blow, the War Rider ambushes and knocks him down. Even though he's injured, Irving gathers his strength and thrusts the sword of Methuselah into the War Rider's abdomen. As the flames go out, the War Rider turns into a lava flow. Elsewhere, Henry turns pale and blood flows from his eyes. Before they have time to celebrate, Irving collapses from severe injuries. Although Katrina tries to save him with a spell, they can't save their comrade's life. Abby is devastated. In her anger, she decides to use the sword herself to eliminate Moloch. The group begins to formulate the next step of their plan. Moloch orders Henry to retrieve the sword, but without the protection of the War Rider's armor, Henry is extremely vulnerable. He knows going would be like handing over his head on a platter. However, Moloch is the epitome of authoritative leadership. He tells Henry to be grateful for the opportunity to sacrifice himself for Moloch's glory. Finally, Henry begins to see the cruel nature of the demon lord, whom he has always regarded as a father. He arrives at the church where everyone else is, easily subdues Abby and Jenny with magic, and is about to leave with the sword. But Crane steps forward, brandishing the real holy sword, and Katrina begins to chant a spell. Cornered, Henry forces Crane to choose between the end of the world and killing him. Even though Crane has already expressed his willingness to take his son's place, to face Moloch, to exchange life for life, the cunning Henry seizes an opportunity to subdue everyone without wasting much effort. Soon after, they are brought before Moloch, and Henry is ordered to kill Katrina to ignite the last white tree. But Crane offers himself in place of his wife. Henry initially despises the story in Genesis of a believer willingly sacrificing his son for God, saying such a father is unforgivable. But at the last moment, Henry suddenly drives the sword of Methuselah into Moloch's chest. A flash of red light burst out, turning everything into ashes. The scene shifts to Crane waking up from unconsciousness, only to find everything around him burnt to a crisp. It seems there was a violent fire or explosion the night before. Although the 4 people who came with him are safe, Henry has disappeared. Fast forward 6 weeks, Abby is explaining to Crane modern people's many demands on agricultural products. Crane notices something odd. An apple has traces of sulfur burns and is full of maggots. Although the shop owner explains that it's just one rotten fruit, Crane keeps asking if there have been any strange phenomena recently, leaving Abby speechless. Although it's been peaceful during this time, Crane is certain that this is the calm before the storm. He seems to have developed an obsession, stubbornly thinking that everything is related to demons. In fact, if they want to know where magic is being used, they just need to find Katrina, and they can quickly figure it out. But on the night Moloch disappeared, the couple parted in disagreement. One is holed up in Corbin's cabin, the other is squatting in the police station's records room. But Crane always feels that his wife still has feelings for Brunt, which he absolutely cannot tolerate. To alleviate Crane's stress, Abby suggests that they investigate the mysterious deaths of farm animals. But after searching all night, they come up empty. Just as they are about to return, a dark shadow quickly floats past the bushes. Crane finally decides to find a job, and while discussing their future plans, they hear the sound of a spell being chanted in the distance. 3 robed figures seem to be praying. They don't seem to be human, with their dark faces and blood-red eyes. Just as a fierce battle is about to begin, an angel unexpectedly breaks into the house, causing both to think they're seeing ghosts. The newcomer quickly deals with one of the monsters, while the other 2 flee into the fire, seeing the unfavorable situation. Having finished his divine power, the angel turns to Crane and Abby, leaving them stunned. It turns out Abby and Crane are quite the renowned figures in the supernatural circle, possibly even famous far and wide. After a brief standoff, both sides put away their weapons. The scene then switches to Katrina, who has been working on strengthening the dungeon's protection spell for the past few weeks. She has been trying to restore the Death Rider's humanity, and thus free him from being the embodiment of the Apocalypse Horseman. After all, she and Crane bear some responsibility for Brunt's current state. Nonetheless, Brunt shows no willingness to cooperate with the woman who once betrayed him. The angel educates them, explaining that the witness is actually a civilian and doesn't need to lead charges into battles. It wasn't until 6 weeks ago that he managed to break free from Moloch's imprisonment. With the death of the demon lord, Purgatory's order collapsed, and many creatures took the opportunity to escape into the human world. His main reason for coming here is to track and exterminate them. Although the angel's words sound believable, bearing in mind the precedent set by the fallen angel Lucifer, it's still uncertain whether the person before them is friend or foe. They decide to wait and see. After notifying Jenny about the current situation, Abby and the angel engage in casual conversation. However, the angel, who isn't fond of answering questions from mortals, outright refuses to respond. He served in heaven for many years before leaving there. After many days apart, the couple finally meets and breaks the ice. Katrina believes she has found a way to separate Brunt from the Death Rider. The angel tells her that the demons that escape to the human world are looking for a new master. Since their former boss was killed, the Death Rider automatically ascends to the second-in-command position. The golden ring in the angel's possession has the power to kill the Death Rider, but first, they need to find him. Seeing Jenny flirting with a bartender, Nick can't help but feel a bit jealous. Upon receiving the news, he rushes over and finds Jenny dressed up for a night out, which sets his heart aflutter. The Egg of Azag is a type of rock demon. Its radiance can illuminate the path to nearby demons and is perfect for tracking. The problem is, he doesn't know how to use it. After all, there weren't any instruction manuals in ancient times. Abby takes the angel to the dungeon, and his pre-battle speech inspires her greatly. The angel also gives her a small golden ring, saying she can call him anytime if there's trouble. Abby instantly becomes his fan. Katrina is also surprised to see the angel. Through their conversation, they discover that they both have spent time in Purgatory, giving them common ground. Although they might have found a way to separate the Death Rider from Brunt, both Abby and Crane believe that the risk is too high. Meanwhile, upon learning that the angel's purpose is to kill Death Rider, Katrina, after receiving a promise from him to cease killing once he regains his humanity, informs the others about the angel's arrival and secretly releases Brunt. By the time the 3 of them arrive at the dungeon, Brunt has vanished. For now, they can only hope to find him before making any further plans. Crane expresses his suspicions regarding the angel. Something about him just feels off. On Jenny's end, she and Nick have tried various methods, but the magic stone remains unresponsive. However, descriptions from his ex-girlfriend about his knack for ruining relationships spark an idea in Nick. He realizes that the stone might just be a container, and he was right. Through the magic stone, Nick spots 2 red-eyed demons surrounded by lush trees, a large wooden house, and a Ferrari carriage indicative of a stable. Jenny realizes that it's exactly where the Willow Forest is located. This is bad news for the Death Rider because he is there too. Upon learning the Death Rider's location, Abby summons the angel, who arrives promptly. Before Abby can disclose the Death Rider's hiding spot, Crane calls. He confirms their suspicions about the angel. The false scripture mentions that he has always arrived a few weeks before every major disaster in history: the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, the Antioch earthquake, and the Justinian plague. The question is he trying to prevent these disasters or cause them? At the Willow Forest, the Death Rider is accepting the demon's oaths of allegiance. Using the power of spells and devil's blood, he is forging a new weapon. On the way, the angel asserts that many humans have been corrupted by evil. Just like decay, they must be eliminated before the whole is infected. His large golden ring can not only kill the Death Rider, but also seize his power. When the time comes, he will preside over a purge, washing away human sins with his blade, much like a flood cleansing the world. The first to fall will be the Death Rider, followed by the witch Katrina, and the massacre will continue until the Golden Age arrives. Just as the new battle axe is finished, the angel arrives at the scene. Abby and Crane join forces to stop him, but they are blocked by red-eyed demons. The angel throws his golden ring, which misses and crashes through a wall. Without his usual weapon, the Death Rider quickly gains the upper hand. Just as his opponent is about to suffocate, the golden ring flies back, impaling the Death Rider from behind. After a round of mixed doubles, the blocking demons are eliminated by the two. Inside the house, the golden ring is already absorbing the Death Rider's power. Abby quickly devises a battle plan to distract the angel, while Crane sneaks up from behind to grab the Death Rider's battle axe. However, as soon as he picks up the axe, Crane is exposed. He never intended to fight the angel, though. He simply wanted to distract him long enough to pry the golden ring from the Death Rider and smash it. The angel realizes the situation is rapidly deteriorating and takes flight without looking back. The Death Rider, being immortal, quickly recovers and charges at Crane with his axe. Crane stands his ground, warning the Death Rider that if he kills him, his dream of being a hero will be shattered. Due to his previous promise to Katrina, the Death Rider merely drives them away, forbidding them from disturbing him again. Back at the Trout Lake cabin, the couple started bickering again. Crane, as a father, is willing to risk his life to save his son Henry. But as a husband, he can't bear the thought of being manipulated to save a romantic rival. Even though the enemy has changed, the war is far from over. With the addition of the angel, future battles may become even more challenging. The scene shifts to a disheveled man walking into a supermarket, paying no attention to the clerk's greeting and starting drinking heavily from the fridge. The camera zooms in, revealing the man to be Irving. Understanding that he's still in Sleepy Hollow, it seems his mission is not yet complete. The scene shifts to an art restorer working on an old painting. Suddenly, a red liquid with the strong smell of blood seeps from the painting, indicating that it's not paint. Before he can comprehend what's happening, the painting returns to its original state. Over at Crane's, he decides to attend an antique exhibition to mend his relationship with Katrina. Upon arrival, Katrina realizes that many of the items there once belonged to her friend, Mrs. Adams. Crane introduces Katrina to his friend, Grant, the art restorer as shown earlier. Aware of Crane's involvement in supernatural occurrences, Grant seeks to inquire about the strange phenomenon from the previous night. However, the curator's appearance prevents them from finishing their conversation. As Katrina touches her friend's desk, she suddenly feels dizzy, sensing a dark power. Combined with Grant's earlier suggestion of a possible haunting, it becomes clear that the situation is far from simple. While dining and looking at the wine cup, Katrina recalls the voice and smile of Mrs. Adams. Later, the puzzled Grant is studying the painting from the previous night again, but after a long while, he makes no new discoveries. As he turns to leave, something seems to attack him from behind. He screams in a chicken voice, denying the possibility of such an event. Katrina realizes that the recurring images can't simply be memories. There must be a special purpose. A scream echoes, and everyone rushes to the living room where Grant's body is found hanging upside down from the ceiling. Meanwhile, Abby is studying her family diary when Irving suddenly appears at the police station. His appearance takes everyone by surprise, given his current status as a fugitive murderer. Crane speculates that Irving, like Andy, may have been resurrected after death due to his soul being stripped. Almost simultaneously, another murder occurs at the auction. It's very likely that after Moloch's elimination, a new spirit has emerged in the town. Due to so many bizarre cases, Inspector Lena has started to consider cult-related motives in unusual cases. Upon seeing Katrina, she proposes that the couple should stay to assist with the police investigation, analyzing the rare manner of death. Crane and his wife understand that the method of death is imitating the Hanged Man from the tarot cards, specifically the 12th card in the major arcana, symbolizing rebirth through death. In 1781, there was a string of similar murders, and the investigator was the husband of Mrs. Adams. Although she wasn't a witch, she too was battling for the weak. From the modus operandi, Mrs. Adams believed the killer had a medical background, but the case remained unsolved and eventually became a cold case. It's possible that they are facing the same criminal now, so the two decide to join forces in pursuit of justice. Irving's consciousness is very confused, and his last memory is of killing the war rider. Abby tells him the news of his own death, and his reappearance proves the War Rider's resurgence. Simply put, Irving is now an uncontrollable potential threat, so staying in jail is the best choice. Elsewhere, Katrina discovers that the red oil on the painter's blade in the painting was added later. Crane recognizes it as fresh human blood. It dawns on Katrina that not only doctors know about human anatomy, but so do painters. This means their wanted murderer has been hiding here. Upon looking at the painting again, the painter inside has already turned his head, staring at them sinisterly, indicating it's a living spirit inside. The curator has the same red stain on his finger as Grant. Katrina thinks that the way the painter spirit leaves the painting is similar to a portal connecting Purgatory and the human world. Somehow, Grant activated the dormant dark power when working. They soon found out the author of this painting is James, once hailed as a dreamer, but after misconduct due to alcohol, he was expelled from Washington's circle and became a painter. No one has seen him since 1782. All clues point to this man from over 200 years ago as the murderer. Since he used magic to use the painting as a sanctuary, draining the victim's blood must have another purpose. As long as he uses this blood to complete the inverted cross he's been painting, he can fully revive. Upon returning to the exhibition room, James has already disappeared from the painting. Crane remembers that the curator had also touched the painting before, and so did he. He must stop James from killing again as quickly as possible. He leaves Katrina to guard the painting to prevent others from touching it. Crane finds the curator. Unlike Abby, Jenny trusts Irving's humanity more. However, Abby insists that caution is the key and asks Jenny to get weapons from Nick. If Irving misbehaves, they might have to send him back to the grave. Abby tells Irving's wife about his resurrection and hopes she can help determine if Irving is a threat. It turns out that after touching the painting, the curator also heard someone whispering in his ear about needing more fresh blood. It seems that stopping James is now of utmost urgency. Through her memories, Katrina takes out her friend's notebook from the desk. The ethereal footsteps behind her are getting closer. James is back, covered in blood, walking into a room on his own. According to the information from Nick, Jenny found a body in the wilderness. It was said that buried with him was a demon-suppressing bullet made of Hell's platinum. To Jenny's surprise, to get the bullet, she had to dig it out from the body. Holding back her nausea, Jenny retrieved the bullet. But since it was used to suppress demons, the moment the last bullet was extracted, the body came alive instantly. Jenny promptly pushed a bullet back in, and the body finally became quiet. In relief, Jenny loudly cursed at Nick. Crane wanted to help the curator escape, but the moment he turned around, the curator had disappeared. He ran back to the exhibition room, only to see the curator being absorbed into the painting. Despite Crane's desperate attempt to pull him back, the curator was drawn into the painting. Later, based on Mrs. Adams' notes, they discovered that the cracks on the frame of the painting were arranged in a pattern. It was runic writing, part of a witch-catching spell. Back then, Mrs. Adams herself acted as bait, and with Father Alfred's help, they sealed James into the painting. It seems that during Grant's restoration, he accidentally damaged the seal, allowing the bloodthirsty demon to re-emerge. To avoid police surveillance, they took the painting to the restoration room. Crane had planned to enter the painting alone, to rescue the curator and eliminate James, but Katrina was determined to accompany him. Reciting the spell, they both entered the painting. Outside the window, the wind howled and rain poured. They had entered the killer's inner world. Upon seeing Irving again, both Jenny and her sister understood that unless absolutely necessary, they didn't want to harm their old friend. Abby had no choice but to call Crane and ask Katrina to help identify Irving's soul. The room within the painting was terrifying and filled with sorrow and pain. Due to his lack of inspiration, James ultimately chose death as his unique form of art. They found the curator, thankfully still alive. Katrina looked at the painting. James had completed the ceremony and was about to break free from his shackles forever. After saving the curator, the three decided to leave immediately. But before Katrina could finish her spell, James emerged from the blood on the floor. Fortunately, the spell worked, and the three returned to reality. Crane prepared to destroy the painting with a paint thinner, but James's arm suddenly reached out. Soon, his entire body emerged from the painting. Abby arrived in time, shooting James as he was about to attack, but he quickly got up again. Crane realized that his weakness must be the painting. Several demon-suppressing bullets pierced the canvas, causing James to fall to the ground. After a life-and-death experience, Crane and Katrina finally regained their trust in each other. Back at the police station, Lena told Abby that the local prosecutor had called. They had determined that the charges against the resurrected Irving were not valid. Their reborn comrade was now free. Previously, due to Katrina releasing the Death Rider without permission, a conflict arose between Crane and Abby. To ease the tense relationship, the group decided to unwind at a bar. However, before they could fully relax, Nick announced that there was business to handle and left in a hurry. Upon arriving at the meeting place, a middle-aged woman stepped out of a car. Much to Nick's surprise, it was Carmilla, who was once his childhood caretaker. From their conversation, it was clear that Nick had been intentionally avoiding her. He tried to leave after a brief goodbye, but Carmilla stopped him. She tried to persuade him to join her in robbing the Knox mansion. Nick flatly refused, given the high stakes of the operation, but in a blink of an eye, Carmilla appeared behind him, her teeth transforming into those of a beast. She told Nick it was time to repay his debt. Growing impatient while waiting for Nick, the group was about to set out to find him when the silent alarm in the police archive room was triggered. They rushed back to find the room in disarray and a figure fleeing the scene. Jenny gave chase and discovered that it was Nick. He only managed to say, "She's gone mad," clearly referring to Carmilla. Jenny was then intercepted by Carmilla, but a crossbow bolt was shot at her. It's Crane and the others who arrived. Due to the shot, Carmilla's appearance had dramatically transformed. She now sported claw-like fingers and a mouth full of fanged teeth. After her transformation, she moved with astonishing speed, disappearing from the scene like a flash. All that remained were several pools of black liquid. Following a lab test, it was revealed that Carmilla's blood contains a strong acid capable of corroding almost anything. It turns out that she is a Rakshasa, an undead creature from Hindu mythology, loyal to the goddess who controls death and rebirth. She possessed incredible speed and remarkable strength. The group decided to split up. Abby and Jenny went to investigate the middleman involved in Nick's business that night, while Crane and Katrina sorted out the missing items and looked for clues. Upon meeting the middleman, the sisters played good cop, bad cop, and their teamwork was flawless. They quickly got Carmilla's name. It turns out Carmilla was also a treasure hunter, but unlike Nick, this woman was naturally cruel and a dangerous killer. While tidying up the room, Crane discovered a replica of the halo blade that the angel had given to Abby. The object still possessed the ability to summon angels, and it was clear that Abby didn't want him to know about it. Having learned of the Rakshasa's identity, Crane also discovered the target of the burglary, a set of architectural blueprints drawn by the historically famous architect named Knox. He was highly proficient in puzzles and locks, a skill once used to preserve military weapons. The Knox mansion, now inherited by his successor, still stored a large number of supernatural items in a secret room. Carmilla revealed that she turned into what she is now because she was captured by a cult in Mumbai when she went looking for Nick, who had left without a word. The cult marked her with the sign of the Rakshasa. There was something in the secret room of the Knox mansion that could turn her back into a human. This successor was a somewhat famous black market boss, and his mansion was hosting a live trade that night. The crowded scene and lax restrictions provided the perfect opportunity for a rescue mission. Arriving at the Knox mansion, Jenny was assigned to keep an eye on Nick. Abby and Crane originally planned to handle Carmilla, but the successor was distracted by the demon-repelling crossbow and Crane couldn't extricate himself. According to the blueprint, Nick easily opened the main gate, allowing Carmilla to enter the secret room. Although Jenny tried to persuade Nick to leave Carmilla, he slyly stole her phone and locked it away. Abby discovered that Carmilla found a bronze statue in the secret room. A failed attack on her led to Abby being captured. Crane rushed over, but Carmilla threatened them with Abby's life, leading to a stalemate. At this point, Nick appeared and proposed to stay behind, letting Abby and Crane go. However, Carmilla didn't trust them, and they were locked in the secret room. Nick promised to notify the successor when he left. Crane recognized that the statue Carmilla took was a figure of Gale, the key to transforming people into the Rakshasa. Back at their hideout, Carmilla drugged Nick with wine, continuously thanking the goddess Gale, saying they would never be separated again. Crane noted the Tree of Liberty design on the secret room's iron door. A forceful push revealed a mechanism. The door would open if they chose the correct button, but a wrong choice could spell their doom. In this dilemma, Abby opened up to Crane about the golden ring clue, which reminded Crane of Knox's most praiseworthy trial, the test of trust. Without hesitation, he pressed the button representing promise, but predictably, it was the wrong choice. Iron plates fell from all sides, spikes extended from the walls, and the room grew smaller. Just as they were about to be skewered, Abby suggested trying the button representing gold, given Knox's reputation as a gambler. The mechanism stopped just in time, and they safely exited the room. Reunited with Jenny, the trio located Carmilla's hideout through Jenny's phone. Before launching an attack, Abby and Crane analyzed the stolen gala figure, connecting the dots between the scene of Carmilla's swift escape in the tunnel and the fact that fire and iron are the weaknesses of the Rakshasas. Inside the hideout, a transformation ceremony was underway. Carmilla's followers were turning into Rakshasas, and with Gala's tears, Nick would soon join them. Abby and Crane intervened but were held back by Carmilla's minions. The figure of Gali, floating in midair, seemed to come alive as black tears flowed from its eyes. The ceremony was about to complete when Jenny knocked out Carmilla from behind, freeing Nick. Facing the transformed Carmilla, Jenny was powerless. Nick stabbed Carmilla with a crowbar, but pure metal couldn't harm the Rakshasa. Seeing Nick with a torch and crowbar, Carmilla reverted to her human form, begging with him to spare her sexy body. Taking advantage of Nick's hesitation, she escaped, indicating they will encounter her again. Returning the stolen blueprints, Nick decided to leave town to search for Carmilla, thus providing an answer to why he parted ways with Jenny. Due to his unique background, Nick did this to protect his loved ones from harm. After another life-and-death experience, the two witnesses, Crane and Abby, reconciled again, following the river to its end, just like the lyrics of a song. In a side plot, due to insufficient evidence, the judge released Irving in court. Although resurrected and acquitted, his wife was still worried. She insisted on finding Katrina to confirm her husband's health. After drinking a potion, Irving instantly recalled images related to the war rider. Katrina said she no longer felt Henry's control over her, implying Irving's body and soul were now free of control. But Katrina's expression suggested things wouldn't end so smoothly. As expected, Irving, embracing his wife, had no reflection in the glass, indicating that his soul was missing. The scene shifts to two staff members who were preparing for an auction the following day. Among the items up for auction was a diary of John Dee, the most trusted advisor of Queen Elizabeth I and arguably the chief royal magician. After the staff had placed the diary into the display case, a mysterious man in a black hat stormed in. Ignoring everyone, he smashed the glass and took the diary. When someone tried to stand in his way, the man slit his wrist, letting blood drip to the floor. This act seemed to have a special effect as he extended his right hand, making the two feel suffocated, and they fell to the ground. Meanwhile, Crane decided to move out of the archives and asked Abby to help him find a house. Along the way, they learned some modern real estate sales techniques. Unable to stand the enthusiastic sales pitch from the estate agent, the two ran away. However, Crane's wish to have a home of his own would have to wait, as a robbery had occurred in the auction museum the previous night, which caused the death of two people. Strangely, the report showed that the victims' blood had boiled in their bodies. The CCTV at the scene did not capture a clear image of the criminal, and John's diary was missing. Aside from his worldly knowledge, John Dee was also renowned in the field of mysticism. The spells he compiled were considered a grand grimoire filled with taboo black magic. Although the original intention of the compilation was to understand the power of enemies, the result was a shock. The book became a prized possession that enemies eagerly sought. In order to understand the contents of the book and find clues, they went to the outskirts to seek Katrina's help. It seemed that another dark soul, freed by the death of Moloch, had arrived in town. Although it seemed calm on the surface, losing Henry had dealt a heavy blow to Katrina. Lab reports showed that there were traces of blood at the scene that didn't belong to the two victims. This blood contained a very rare alkaloid, a compound belonging to the legendary mandrake flower, also known as the moonlight flower. It's said that before releasing dangerous spells, some wizards would consume their petals to enhance their magical power. It was clear that the wizard last night used blood magic, a kind of black magic, which is extremely destructive. Through digital technology, they restored part of the surveillance footage. Katrina recognized the mysterious man in the photo. His name was Solomon, a figure even wizards feared. Terror was his calling card, and death followed him like a shadow. Solomon was a devout believer from a young age and was beloved by the local community. He was a pillar of the small town, leading the coven of witches at the time. However, due to people's fear of the unknown and long-term suppressed pressure, Solomon began to lose his way. He fell in love with a young woman, Sally, and his guard was lowered by his affection, so much so that he used magic to heal Sally's wounds. Katrina's grandmother witnessed everything. Later, Solomon tried to get closer to Sally, but she was very afraid and resistant. In his panic, Solomon accidentally killed her. To cover up the truth, Solomon went all in, using magic to change Sally's appearance into a demon and expose the existence of the coven to divert attention. Katrina's grandmother demanded that Solomon turn himself in to put things right, but she was also killed. Unable to cover up his mistakes, Solomon went all the way down the wrong path. A massacre against witches began in the small town. The survivors rallied their strength and chased Solomon relentlessly, eventually banishing him to Purgatory. In order to recover his magic power as soon as possible, Solomon would surely use the spells in the book. At the display case where the grimoire was last stored, Katrina cast a tracking spell. Although she couldn't determine Solomon's exact location, she made an unexpected discovery. It turned out that John Dee, in order to prevent the spells in the book from being misused by those with ulterior motives, deliberately stored the pages separately. Unless the book is complete, the spells inside cannot be activated. In other words, if they could find the other half of the book before Solomon, they could successfully stop him. Irving found Abby and told her that Katrina had vouched for his soul's purity. His wife and he decided to move past their history and start anew. Abby gradually began to let down her guard around him and informed Crane that Irving was ready to shed his past and begin a fresh life. A thought struck Crane. Solomon had spent over 400 years in Purgatory, contemplating all that he had lost. His greatest wish might be to resurrect Sally, the girl who once haunted his dreams. However, the gate of the afterlife would not easily open, nor would it easily close once opened. Sally's soul might be unharmed, but what else might come out was anyone's guess. The world of the living could be flooded with spirits of the dead. They rushed to the warehouse where the other half of the book was stored, only to discover that Solomon had arrived first. Before they could act, they were knocked down. Katrina unexpectedly stopped Solomon from causing further damage. When he saw the descendant of his old friend, Solomon naturally tried to get closer. He asked if she had been feeling powerless lately. It was because there was no seed of darkness in the spell. He told her she should align the mind and spirit. He slit his wrists, and a large pool of blood spread across the floor. 2 blood figures sprang out, and the 3 of them, too tired to cope, had to split up. Katrina went to stop Solomon, while Abby and Crane held off the blood figures. Solomon, now in possession of the complete book, became even more powerful. Just as he was about to cast a spell, Katrina blew a handful of divine sand at him, interrupting the incantation. After dispatching the blood figures, the 2 went to assist Katrina. Solomon easily subdued his opponents and was about to leave when Katrina suddenly had her eyes turn white. A dark power surged within her, a feeling of uncontrollability that terrified her. Solomon calmly left. Back at the cabin, Katrina remained silent, attributing her quietness to exhaustion from the recent fight. She left her husband Crane with her, while Abby went to find Irving. Given his condition, he might know how to kill the undead, but all he got were words of encouragement. Since they couldn't rely on anyone else, Crane and Abby decided to resolve the problem on their own. The spell Solomon cast contained the word Traveler. Abby's family diary recorded this word. The Traveler's spell is ancient and powerful, allowing one to return to the past. It seemed that Solomon never intended to resurrect the dead, but to travel through time to change history. This could potentially trigger a butterfly effect, completely changing the present world. But the conditions for casting the Traveler's spell are very demanding, which bought the 2 some preparation time. Invited by Abby, Irving joined the battle. As Solomon gained his power by consuming mandrake, the chemical knowledge of the police forensic staff could be of great help. Moreover, they needed to simulate the source of Katrina's magic power, which was the elements of wind, rain, thunder, and lightning. Only in this way could they create their own magic. At the stroke of midnight, Solomon arrived at the ley line within the dense forest. As he recited the incantation, a gateway in time and space opened. Seeing Sally, he was disoriented, and a small vial exploded next to him. A furious Solomon unleashed his deadly move, intending to kill Crane. Crane, however, dodged using the cover of the trees, and a dart loaded with atropine struck Solomon. This drug caused an overdose of mandrake alkaloids in his body, triggering spasms and hallucinations. Taking advantage of his weakened state, Abby closed the circuit again. A current of thousands of volts ran through Solomon's body. Faced with the enemy who dared to harm his wife, Crane's rage was uncontrollable. He was ready to eliminate Solomon with a pure physical blow, but was stopped by Abby. While the 2 of them were busy searching for Irving, he silently came to Solomon's side, took out the magic book, and with a swift kick, ended Solomon, causing him to turn into ashes. It seemed that there was indeed something wrong with this resurrected Irving, and he did not hand over the magic book, simply saying it disappeared with Solomon. Crane's recent macho performance reminded Abby not to provoke Katrina. But as soon as they mentioned waking up his sleeping wife to go to a bar, Crane spontaneously followed Abby out of the door. After they left, Katrina came to the living room and cast magic on the flowers again, but her eyes turned white and the flowers turned into powder. It was evident that she was beginning to dabble in dark magic. In a side plot, since Moloch was eliminated, Henry had been hiding in a motel. Suddenly losing his target, he unknowingly developed an unprecedented affection for the motel owner and her son. But the peace was broken by a few gangsters. Their style reminded Henry of the world's law of the jungle, and if you're a wolf, you always have to eat sheep. His hibernation ended, and he killed a few people casually in high spirits. It seemed that the war rider would soon return to the world. The scene shifts to a group of construction workers discovering a sealed tunnel in the sewer layer, below which was a strange trap door. Driven by curiosity, several of them worked together to open the manhole cover, but before they could see anything, they were pulled down by something that suddenly jumped out and the manhole cover closed again. During this time, Crane had basically adapted to modern society. Since Washington's Bible stated that suffering would last for 7 years, they decided to accept and face it. The disappearance of the construction workers quickly attracted the attention of the police. Abby thought of the detailed records about this tunnel in the archives, and they must have touched some forbidden existence. A bearded journalist, who was a brother of one of the missing persons, appeared at the scene. Surprisingly, he could clearly describe the strange events that had happened here. There was no sign of struggle in the sewer, and the debris of equipment and clothing was left behind. Fortunately, a slight air current indicated the position of the sandwich layer. The two found the vertical well and the abandoned equipment. The manhole cover was engraved with the symbol of magic, and there were scratch marks on the ground. They inferred that the 3 workers must have been pulled into the well. They tried to open the trap door together, but failed several times. The equipment showed a large space below, an octagonal dome, indicating it was a main hall in the new Palladian style, at least 200 years old. According to Crane, the designer was Jefferson, the 3rd president of the United States, who loved design. The Masonic chamber was his work. Abby found that a video stored in the missing person's cell phone inadvertently captured an image of a monster. It seemed they were going to be busy again. During the war period, Washington was responsible for building a penetrable chamber to protect important secrets and gave it a special name. Regrettably, they didn't know what was stored in this chamber, but the special word was found in Abby's family notes, which mentioned the builder had summoned dark souls to protect the chamber. But to find out more details, they needed to investigate in person. They used tools to open the manhole cover, descended into the well, and Abby tried to contact the missing 3 workers via walkie-talkie. There was a quick response, but the other side seemed very flustered, and before they could clearly state their location, the communication ended. A number of monsters popped up from the depths of the tunnel. The best plan for now was to retreat first, then deal with them. But before climbing up the ladder, Crane was entangled by a monster. The journalist broke in and started shooting the monster with the flashlight, which seemed working. Having escaped danger, the journalist demanded to know the truth of the matter. This caused a disagreement between them, but ultimately, they agreed to let him participate in the operation to a limited extent. The Latin inscribed on the trapdoor translates to "life taker." Unlike innate monsters, they were originally a secret military unit during wartime, assigned here for guard duty. After centuries of confinement in a dark space with no care or maintenance, they have managed to survive but have evolved into supernatural beings. They have been in a state of hibernation until they were awakened by a survey team. Now they must be starving. Immediate rescue operations must be undertaken or the trapped workers stand no chance of survival. The trio once again ventured into the sewer. The journalist stayed outside as backup while Crane sprinkled some powder on the flashlight. During the night, this powder had been used to amplify signal fires. In a rather extravagant move, he tossed the camera into the well, with the other 2 following swiftly. Armed with light and weapons, they made their way into the secret chamber this time. There stood Jefferson, as alive as ever. On seeing his old subordinates, Jefferson was friendly, attributing his existence to the wonders of science. He had known the secret chamber required an inexhaustible energy source, so he designed a cube, empowering it with everlasting energy through supernatural means. This allowed him to exist in the form of a hologram. For some reason, Jefferson didn't seem in a rush to rescue the missing workers. Upon learning it was now 2015, he told Crane he had something to deliver to him. Meanwhile, Abby was inspecting the secret chamber. She noticed the cube was under the protection of life takers, presumably their lair. After feeding, they slipped into brief hibernation. She also found 2 surviving workers, but attacking the lair would also destroy the chamber, erasing all research on the witness. The duo faced a choice, either to rescue the workers or to secure more valuable data to gain an upper hand in the future war. On this point, Crane and Abby were in agreement. Life should never be carelessly given up. Upon reaching the lair and after a fierce battle, they successfully rescued the two workers. However, the presence of the life-takers remained a significant threat and had to be completely eradicated, even if it meant destroying the chamber. Leaving Abby to look after the unconscious workers, Crane returned to the secret chamber alone with explosives. As he was about to approach the lair, Jefferson shut the gate because he had believed all along that using the information here could save more people. The underground cave could confine the life-takers, but he didn't realize that the barren land of centuries ago was now a country with 300 million inhabitants. More people would be coming here. Crane's words moved Jefferson. He then told Crane the exact location to plant the explosives. The chain explosion would destroy both the secret chamber and the monster's lair. Watching the smoke fill the world, Abby felt an exhilarating relief. In the cabin by Trout Lake, Henry came to visit Katrina. He said now that Moloch had been eradicated, it was time for their race to rise. He then pricked Katrina's palm with a rose thorn. She woke up abruptly, thinking it was just a nightmare, but the wound on her palm and the rose indicated that Henry had indeed been there. In a side plot, Irving, who was still working for Henry in secret, started to act again. This time, he approached Jenny. The little girl was off guard. Irving asked for her help to retrieve something from the police evidence room. Jenny was initially hesitant, but when she heard it was a wedding ring, she agreed readily. However, she noticed a strange pattern tattooed on Irving's arm. The two snuck into the police station at night. As expected, what Irving was looking for wasn't a wedding ring at all. Seeing the situation going south, Irving knocked Jenny out and fled. Irving knew his soul had been tainted. The darkness inside him was like another personality, occasionally taking over his body. His memory was a series of fragmented pieces. He had passed Katrina's test thanks to a temporary redemption rune, which gave him human senses, a clear mind, and superhuman strength. Irving found a ledger at Henry's place that could trace back to the Hellfire Club. His break-in at the police station was actually to retrieve a sum of money left for his wife and daughter. He knew he didn't have much time left before the darkness completely overtook him. He hoped that Jenny would continue to protect their family in the future. The scene shifts. Despite the vast amount of information on the internet, knowledge on topics like how to exorcise demons is still rare. Crane and Abby visit the library again in hopes of finding something useful, but some books are indeed rare, and the diligent librarian can't provide much assistance, expressing despair. The bronze bell by the road vibrates slightly, affecting the curly-haired woman whose husband lost her money, the man in glasses who was hit by a car, and the gothic girl attending a funeral, all to fall into a splitting headache. After brief agony, their eyes roll back almost simultaneously. Suddenly, the woman's husband is strangled. The car driver is hit by a mysteriously severed power cable, and the gothic girl accuses the wife and her lover in the voice of the deceased. But moments later, everything returns to normal. Not far off, Henry looks smug. Chaos occurring at the same time and place certainly has an unusual reason. Just as Abby and Crane are about to head to the city center to investigate, Jenny arrives to tell them that Irving has turned dark. Crane believes there's still a chance to save him, but the method is quite extreme. It involves using the head of a gorgon. Although this approach is high risk, it has been successfully attempted by an alchemist in the past. They now have no choice but to try it. Once they finish the current case, they will focus on saving Irving. All the clues at the scene indicate that this brief chaos is shadowed by supernatural forces. Reflecting on the former cases, they realize that before entering a trance state, people all seem to hear the sound of a bell. Thus, the bronze bell by the road becomes a key clue. This bell bears a striking resemblance to the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia. Crane is sure that the one in Philadelphia is the one he cracked. He had inspected it closely. It's revealed that in 1773, Washington ordered Crane to find the wicker box from the Indian Clock Company and thoroughly destroy its contents. Armed with black powder, he set out on his mission. His plan was discovered at the last moment, but luckily, the explosive was detonated, destroying the large bell. Only now does he understand Washington's intentions. These bells have the power to grant people witchcraft. No matter who places one of these bells in the square, for whatever reason, they must find out why and stop it before the bell rings again. The problem is, ever since the Solomon incident, Katrina has been silent and reticent. They are unsure if she can still assist them. At this time in the cabin, Katrina starts using blood magic to locate Henry. Henry reappears and he's pleased with Katrina's current state, believing that fate has a different plan for them as mother and son. By researching, Abby and Crane discovered that the large bell is inscribed with ancient pagan symbols. They're related to an awakening ritual which can stimulate the powers of those with a witch's bloodline. It's important to note that the witch coven that was once active in this area may have thousands of descendants. When the bell tolls, those descendants will transform into witches. What a magnificent sight that would be. Now is the time to showcase their true skills. Crane volunteers to gather the materials and recreate the black powder they used in the past. Henry brings Katrina to his residence, and the lush, vibrant flowers dazzle her, unwittingly increasing her trust in Henry. Henry takes out the complete magical book that Irving sent. It's said that whoever possesses it will gain enormous magical power. Unexpectedly, rather than seeking destruction, Henry now has a new pursuit. Now he wants to use the powerful magic in the book to resurrect the once active wizard coven. The awakening ritual cannot be completed solely with his power, as the awakening time for the witch descendants is very short. Due to his father Crane's mortal bloodline, his power is limited. Only a pure witch can fully unleash the power of the ritual. As long as the bell toll echoes every corner of the small town, thousands of witch descendants will awaken. They can then create their own dystopia. As for Crane, he's no longer part of the equation. It's the depth of the mother-son bond that makes Katrina completely fall for Henry's words. Meanwhile, Crane, who is as innocent as Bambi, is happily shopping at the supermarket. The task of purchasing raw materials for the black powder has fallen on the shoulders of tough girl Abby. To avoid blowing up the square, they plan to drag the bell into an underground tunnel. These are all wartime constructions, which can effectively absorb the impact of the explosion. Before they can move the bell into the open tunnel entrance, Sniper Irving arrives. Jenny decides to distract him to buy time for Abby. Irving has turned dark and incessantly questions Jenny about the whereabouts of his family. It was he who initially asked Jenny to take them out of town. His body has been enhanced, and bullets no longer harm his bulletproof muscles. On Crane's side, he and Abby are taken by surprise by the sudden appearance of Henry and Katrina. Learning about Katrina's betrayal, Crane doesn't know what to do. The mother and son defend their actions, claiming that they're just reclaiming their homeland. They remind Crane that there was an agreement between the witches and Washington. If the witches helped in the war, they could integrate into society openly, but the reality is far from it. Katrina now believes she's found her true self and that her union with Crane was a mistake. From now on, they'll go their separate ways. The awakening ceremony will be held when the tide in the forbidden area reaches its peak tonight. No one can stop it. With that said, Katrina and Henry trap Abby and Crane in the tunnel. With only a few hours left, the two start looking for a way out. Crane decides to take action against Henry, vowing no more hesitation. Considering the town's history, the bell should have been moved to the long-abandoned City Hall. As long as they set things up well, they can create a diversion and find an opportunity to blow up the bell. Inside the City Hall, Henry and Katrina are all set, only awaiting the right moment for the bell to toll. As the mother and son pair are engrossed in their preparation, Crane fires a warning shot outside. Henry decides to deal with him first to eliminate any potential future problems. Seeing his wayward son emerge, Crane fires his gun, but Henry, being the war rider, effortlessly stops the bullet in midair. Abby tries to ram her car into Henry, but Katrina stops her and uses magic to set the car on fire. The mother and son duo believe they've eliminated an eyewitness, but they soon realize that there was no one in the car. Realizing that he's been tricked, Henry rushes back to the City Hall, only to find Abby about to light the fuse of the explosives. However, Crane and Abby are seasoned warriors, keeping their cool even when captured. They deduce that Henry's face wounds from the car explosion mean he isn't invincible. They devise a new plan that Crane is to shoot and ignite the unnoticed explosives, while Abby distracts Henry by engaging him in combat. They spring into action immediately. To their surprise, Henry first chooses to stop the bullet aimed at the bell. Abby shoots him in the chest. Without the protection of his magic, Henry's body is no different from a regular human's. Struck by the bullet, he falls to the ground. In his final moments, he admits that all he wanted was to feel the love of his parents once more. Meanwhile, Jenny lures Irving into the underground tunnel, revealing the head of the snake monster. She hopes to awaken Irving's humanity. As Henry's life fades, Irving expels a large black smoke, his corrupted soul seeming to cleanse itself. Henry's death sends Katrina into a fit of madness. She berates Crane, declaring that reviving him was her biggest mistake. After restraining the pair, she loudly recites a time travel spell. The portal of time opens, and Abby, who was trying to interrupt the spell, is sucked in along with Katrina. The scene shifts. Abby finds herself in the American Revolutionary War period, and Katrina is once again a field nurse. The spell worked, and they've been transported back to 1781. Due to her strange attire and suspicious behavior, Abby is taken as a runaway slave. With no other option, she claims to possess the secret to winning the war, but insists that she can only share it with Captain Crane. Right at that time, Captain Crane is preparing for battle. His younger self exhibits a ruthless tenacity, as evidenced by his ammo box's motto, "Join or die." He excels in both gunfighting and hand-to-hand combat, proving himself a competent military leader. When he hears that Abby has requested to see him, Crane initially doesn't think much of it. However, after learning that she knows about the Hessian mercenaries, he decides to interrogate her personally. At this point, Crane doesn't recognize Abby. She warns him to be wary of the Death Rider he will soon encounter on the battlefield. At a loss, Crane is then summoned back to his troops by Washington. Abby accurately predicts the contents of the summons and the appearance of the Death Rider, which are top-secret information. Crane begins to realize that there's more to this woman than meets the eye. At this moment, Katrina is in the infirmary searching everywhere for Crane. However, due to Abby's interference, Crane is not lying in the bed where he should be. Knowing that Crane was called away by an ugly woman, Katrina knows it must be her friend Abby. It seems history is already changing. To her surprise, she discovers that most of the dead soldiers have been beheaded, their wounds bearing signs of burns. Abby warns Crane that their enemy is not human, but the Death Rider from the apocalypse. The battle is still raging, and Crane, of course, refuses to accept these claims. Abby seizes the moment to confess that she is from the future, and that if it weren't for her, Crane would have already been killed by the Death Rider. Things become even more complicated, as due to the butterfly effect, everything in the future could deviate from its original path. Because of his dereliction of duty, Crane is reprimanded by Colonel Sutton and ordered to march north with his troops immediately. Abby cannot accompany them. Helpless, Crane can only suggest taking Abby back to headquarters for harsh interrogation. However, Sutton decides to send Abby to a camp specifically for runaway slaves. Crane manages to secure the opportunity to escort her. On the carriage, Abby accurately recounts the romantic history of Crane and his wife, but Crane dismisses it as information gathered by enemy spies. Abby then recalls that the authors of many of their demon-slaying references are still alive. If they can find these authors, they will surely find a way to solve the current predicament. With Washington and Jefferson far away in different locations, they have no choice but to seek out Franklin, who has just returned from France. Katrina confronts the Death Rider on the battlefield, revealing his identity as her former fiancé, and claiming that she, too, has been betrayed by Crane. To gain his trust, she kills a soldier attempting to flee. Arriving at Franklin's residence, Abby tells him that his face is printed on the $100 bill, and Franklin immediately believes her. He says that the lady here comes from 2 centuries in the future, intelligent and articulate. Of course, he also knows about the existence of a grand grimoire that can enable time travel. Franklin is indeed clever, picking up on Abby's deliberate concealment of the enemy witch's name. He believes that as long as they quickly reverse the effects of the traveler's spell, they can still mitigate the impact. However, time is of the essence. They must rush to the Fredericks estate to consult with experts on the specific course of action, specifically Abby's ancestor, Lady Grace. Outside, lightning flashes as the Death Rider makes his way. An unthinkable scene unfolds as Franklin's head is cleaved by the Death Rider's axe just as he lights a bomb. Shocked, Crane decides to imprison Abby again. He believes it's his fault that a great man died prematurely. To regain Crane's trust, Abby is forced to reveal that the evil witch is Katrina, but Crane ignores her and walks away. Abby implores him to look at their selfies in her phone's photo album. Due to his repeated violations of military discipline, Colonel Sutton dismisses Crane from his duties. Given his crimes, he's lucky not to be hanged for treason. Returning home, the couple each harbors their own thoughts. Katrina seizes an idle chat to prepare for using her magic to kill Crane. Thankfully, a soldier arrives to deliver a summons from Washington, preventing Katrina from executing her plan. Leaving, Crane notices a magic book on the table and starts to believe Abby's words. Before his departure, he goes to the evidence room to retrieve Abby's personal belongings. He manages to get into her photo album after some fiddling with her phone. Indeed, their selfies and videos are there. Meanwhile, Sutton finds Abby, and in his rage, he loses his senses and tries to inflict corporal punishment, but Abby easily takes him down. Returning to the prison, Crane now completely believes Abby, and they must rush to the Fredericks estate as soon as possible. Even though the future Katrina is no longer the person Crane knows, he still hopes that Lady Grace can reverse everything. At the aid station, Katrina is treating Sutton's wounds. Through Abby's blood left in the wound, Katrina senses their whereabouts. Sutton, suspicious of her strange abilities, is instantly killed by Katrina. Seeing her living ancestor, Abby is so nervous that she stammers and is at a loss. Luckily, Lady Grace is no ordinary woman. She senses that the girl in front of her is a witness from her family's future. After learning their purpose, she tells them that the Abiro spell can take them back to their original timeline. But the moment the spell takes effect, it will consume the energy protecting the house, making them vulnerable to attack during the procedure. During the preparation time, the Death Rider and Katrina arrive. Since Abby must be present when the spell is cast, Crane decides to go out alone to hold off the enemy. After saying what could be his last words, he leaves Abby looking pale. Grace seizes the opportunity to explain the mystery of the blank pages in the family diary. Abby expects some shocking secret, but Grace simply says that she needs to fill it in herself. Outside, Katrina easily destroys the manor's outer protection. The charging Death Rider is knocked down by a shot from Crane. The two engage in a fierce muscle wrestling. Abby wants to go out and help, but Grace stops her. As the spell is pronounced, the ceremony begins. Time around them freezes. Seeing the Death Rider's axe stopped at Crane's neck, Katrina knows that Abby and the others have succeeded. The portal of time opens again, and time starts to rewind. Soon, they are back in the modern era. Angry, Katrina prepares to kill Abby. Crane rushes over to stop her. In the fight, the magic book falls. Katrina's dagger plunges into her own body. In her last moments, Katrina sees Henry's soul beckoning her and breathes her last in happiness. In a blink of an eye, Crane's home is destroyed, his loved ones gone, leaving him in utter despair. Although Abby tries to console him using only her words but not muscles, Crane's expression is somewhat strange, replying that he had a choice. He then picks up the great magic book. Later, Jenny arrives with Irving, who has now returned to normal, and the demon hunting team is restored to a four-person ensemble. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.